All right, I think we're live. So welcome everyone to another Matt Maran Motoring live stream here on the Matt Maran Motoring YouTube channel. Hope you're all having a great weekend here. Thanks so much for stopping by. So like all the other usual live streams, we're going to go for about 2 hours or so. I give priority answering to anyone who does a super chat or a super thanks. So as anyone who's a member there with the green usernames, they always get that priority answering. If you'd also like that, there's always the join button. And happy to see we have Wheatman, Brian, Danny, Anthony, Kevin, Stilibuster, Theodore, another Danny, and Vishal, and B. Mitchell, and Lancewath, and Fishy Tank One Land. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. And I see Wheatman's got the first comment here. He says, "Good evening, Matt. The fall season is closing in this month with cooler weather. It definitely is, yeah, feeling like fall here for sure. Nice and cool. I don't mind it. And yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying the first little week of fall here in a way. I guess technically it's not fall for another, two weeks or something. But I feel like the actual seasons are always a few weeks behind, at least around here. It seems like, it's always something it's like, yeah, it's felt like this for a while. And now we're just finally getting the actual season change. But Luke, thanks so much for being a member for 19 months now here. He says, I saw a first gen Mercury Cougar, a Chevy SSR, a Fisker with a flag that said, I support Fisker. Poor guy, gal. Man, yeah, they are fully in, I guess. Well, I'm happy that they are probably one of the few people that's actually happy with their Fisker ownership experience or purchase. And I'm guessing the flag is a way of coping with the gigantic depreciation they most likely have faced. And it's like, well, if I'm 30, 40 grand underwater on this car, I'm going to ride to the grave and and act like I'm in the right here and whatever. But I think most people understand that Fisker is dead and gone and not something you should be proud that you bought. Maybe people actually enjoy them, and that's great if they do. I hope that they give them a wonderful long life of service and wish them all the best. But yeah, just not something I'd go around shouting about. But that's interesting. Wow, that's quite the spot. You might win this week, Luke, with that one. And Lancelot, thanks so much for gifting 5 memberships here. I really appreciate it and happy to see some familiar faces and some new ones able to get those as well. And I really appreciate the generosity, Lancelot. Hope you're doing great. And let me see here. Brian says the cars I spotted this week were a Cadillac CTS wagon, very cool, and a Ferrari, very nice. And Danny says hello. Drove today because that's only the only day I could. The Bolt is officially at 76,021 miles, thanks to me. Rear spots were a 97 Cadillac Seville SLS and a second-gen Highlander hybrid. Highlander made me do a double take because I haven't seen a second-gen Highlander hybrid in forever. Nice. Yeah, they are rare, and they have like the different kind of lights and grill in the front and stuff. Yeah, that's fun. Nice spots. And Anthony says, hey, Matt, hope you had a great weekend. Great football weekend for both of my boys. Cool wide body 911 yesterday and a mid-90s two-door Camry. Those have such a nice shape to them. Yeah, I agree. And that's a very rare spot. That's another nice one. Kevin, thanks for stopping by. And Still Buster says, hey, all, my car spots for a second-gen RX-7, a Chevy Beretta. That's fun. I haven't seen a Beretta in years. And an 80s Toyota Master Ace Surf van. That's fun. My quirky spots here. So a couple of the other ones. I first saw in my first Lucid Gravity tonight, which was cool. Saw an orange Charger Daytona yesterday, which was fun. And what's the other little thing I saw here tonight? There's something else, but the one funny one is just the other day, I was listening to the Tokyo Drift song in the car, just driving to film a car review. And as I was listening to Tokyo Drift, I saw I think it was the Honda K truck. It's imported over like the Honda, I think they call it like an A City or something like that. I don't know, but saw one of those, and for like that split second, I was listening to Tokyo Drift, seeing a Japanese only car in America. It was for that sweet millisecond I was in Tokyo in my mind. it was kind of a funny coincidence that I was like listening to that and oh hey look, there's a car that should only be in Japan. I'm so happy. I don't remember exactly what the law is in PA for K trucks and legalizing them, but I am in full support of all these K cars coming over and any Japanese stuff. I went down a little rabbit hole the other night and was discovering going, like even on like Cars and Bids, which I don't make a habit of going on because as many of you know, I'm not a Dog Demura fan, but there was some really nice like 90s WRXs that have been brought in, and they were going for like under 10 grand. You know, it's one of those things. If I could find a way to justify an actual series about it, it would be a fun thing to try and do someday. But I don't drive enough and don't have enough car things to do to ever make a car ownership thing be an actual thing again. But man, I didn't realize they were that cheap. That would be very tempting. So anyway, yeah, I'm so happy we got all these sweet JDM things starting to come in here to the States. Anyway, so those are my fun spots here of the week. But Theodore says, hope you and your family are doing well. Keep up the good work. Love your videos. I appreciate that, Theodore. Hope you and your family are doing well too. And Danny says, my new Daytona just bricked. We'll be applying lemon law time for an S650 GT. Man, I'm sorry to hear that. I know that a few of the Wagoneer S's have been bricking. And I think, and I'm sure you've tried everything already, but someone that had one just commented on one of my videos not too long ago and were like, there were issues, but basically you just have to pull the battery lead off and do like a hard reset. And that has been fixing a lot of the Wagoneer S's. You know, if you haven't tried that already by some crazy coincidence, try that. But yeah, that's kind of one of my hesitations with those cars. And, you know, same thing with Wagoneer S. They're just brand new platform. And I know they delayed Charger in order to get a lot of the kinks worked out of it. That's why it, you know, didn't come as soon as it was supposed to. But, you know, clearly there's work to be done. And I don't think that's the only one I've heard that's been bricked. And so sorry to hear that. It's got to suck. Hopefully it didn't leave you stranded or anything. Yeah, hopefully that's what lemon law is for. So if they can't fix it, you know, I think at least here in PA, I think you have to have it in the shop for something like 80 days or something before it's eligible for lemon law. But yeah, I hope that you're able to get that, you know, taken care of quickly and get an S650 GT. That sounds like a fun alternative as well. Although, just so you know, I know hopefully they got the kinks worked out of that too, but there were a few 2024s that I remember seeing very high profile owners having them brick on them and, you know, having similar kinds of issues. So, you know, sometimes it's just the software. It's just software stuff. And it doesn't even matter what's powering the vehicle. It's just, if they've rushed the software, that's all it takes to brick these cars. You know, I kind of miss the days when actual mechanical things broke and that's why you were stranded on the side of the road. Nowadays, half the time it's because there's random glitches. Same thing with Mach-E's, you know, there's sometimes glitches and that causes them to go haywire. And that applies to any vehicles. And, you know, I know like Hyundai Ioniq 5, Mach-E, both of those have like an inverter kind of issue that sometimes comes up. I think Ford has fixed theirs, but you know, the Hyundai one I think is still out there in, again, very small numbers. But, you know, it's just, this is something that a lot of companies still are working out and struggling with. And, you know, there's always a failure rate for every single kind of vehicle too. But it seems like, at least early on, Daytona is higher than average, especially vehicles that have been out for a while that are, you know, pretty solid for most people. But sorry to hear that. And yeah, hope it gets resolved soon. And Vishal says, what's up, all? My spots were a Ferrari 488, a VinFast VF9, and a gold early to mid 90s Ford Escort wagon. That's an impressive one to still see on the road, especially because I feel like those Escorts probably weren't the most reliable. And so it's a real achievement that that's still going and also rust free. I'm guessing you live in a place where you don't have to worry about rust maybe. But yeah, that's impressive. Nice spots. And B. Mitchell said, finally saw a new Charger in the wild heading home last weekend, opposite direction on the freeway. No idea if EV or ICE. Lucky to catch it. Otherwise, working on the 78 Lincoln Mark 5 power steering. Well, best of luck with that. Unless it was a Stellantis employee or something, the gas ones aren't out on sale yet. I think they said late this year for that, if I remember correctly. So it's most likely you saw an EV one, especially you know, up in the Minnesota kind of area, all those, you know, northerly states, they're leasing super well because, you know, you guys have pretty good EV credits in most of those states. So, you know, that's definitely going to be probably helping to pop up a lot more Charger EVs because again, people are leasing them for under $200 a month. So that's going to move some metal. And happy to see you here, B. Mitchell. I missed you the past few times. We had some little discussions about classics, and yeah, always appreciate your help and your your info that you often can provide. But Danny says this past Friday, my high school marching band went to our first away football game of the season. We barely won 26-23. Well, congrats on winning, because we stopped the home team from scoring the game-winning touchdown with 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter. No, wait, 15 seconds left. That's awesome. Very, very exciting game. That's cool. And Lancelot saying good evening as well, and hopefully all had a great weekend. He says his spots are a red Pontiac Solstice and a sand-colored Gen 1 Raptor. Very nice. That's cool. Yeah, I don't know if any of you guys been watching this. It's called 007 Road to a Million. I've been watching it recently. It's kind of like an amazing race kind of competition show, but they had a little segment where they were doing a race, and it wasn't like a real race. It was a race where it was two Gen 1 Raptors, which is what made me think of this, that were running around Mexico and doing jumps and racing around and stuff. But it was a staged race where whoever got the most questions right, they were the one that, pulled ahead or whatever. So just two stunt drivers, and the people were in the back, like answering trivia questions and stuff. But it was kind of interesting. I've never seen it packaged like that, where, it's a race that's based on that instead of on actual driving. But Gen 1 Raptors are still awesome trucks. And I think that's one that's going to really appreciate. If they haven't started already, I can't imagine those ever getting really cheap, because I think that's always going to be a desirable truck. So yeah, great spot, Lanswath. And Danny says we don't have our equipment buses anymore, so all the band instruments went on the school buses carrying the students. Our township retired all three of my town's high school marching band equipment buses. That's unfortunate. Hopefully they can find some other way to transport instead of having everyone schlep everything on the bus with them. He says, I know you don't know your buses too well, but my high school had two. We had a 94 Thomas 3800 and a 96 Bluebird CV200. I've never even known model names for school buses. That's impressive. The CV200 was the bus that blew up its transmission. Bummer. I don't even know are the Bluebirds based on anything? Do they use... or even the Thomas? I have no clue what those things even run engine-wise, or if they make their own engines or what. That's interesting. I never have gone into the world of school buses or buses in general, really. Although that's the other cool spot, and B. Mitchell would appreciate this one. I saw a beautifully restored 60s city bus. It had the stainless steel sides, a little red stripe at the top. It was the quad headlamps. That's all I can say about it. Now I sound like a non-car person, but had the quad headlamps, and it was beautiful condition, just driving the opposite way on the highway the other day. And I was like, man, I don't know where that's coming from or what it's doing. I think there was a AACC, which is like the antique club there. One of their fall meets, I think, was happening or something, or one of the smaller ones, not the big swap meet, but I think maybe that was what they're going to. I have no clue, but that was a wild thing to see. And let me see. Okay, Spaces, thanks for stopping by. And Danny says on his way home from a band competition, it got stuck doing 35 in the middle of a 65-mile-per-hour highway. That's got to be fun. And Raphael, thanks for stopping by too. And let me see. Also, Justin, sorry I missed your member comment here. Thanks for being a member for 37 months now. He says, went to a big Honda meet today at the Honda Museum here in Ohio and saw crazy unique builds. Even got to meet Honda Pro Jason, favorite car meet I've ever been to. That's awesome. Sounds like a lot of fun. That's cool. I didn't even know that was happening. That's not super far. I think the Honda museum there in Ohio, I think it's only maybe 2 hours from me or something. That's cool. I'm curious what all you saw. I'm sure there's some really rare, archival stuff they probably brought out and all that too. So that's cool. Thanks for sharing. I should have done a little video or something. I'm sure Honda Pro Jason will have lots of coverage, so I'll check out his page for all that. And YH, thank you so much for the first super chat of the night here. He says, Hellcat, skirt fast, pray the tires grip, skirt, skirt. You sound like two with the rhymes here, with the rapping. And I'm disappointed with the new Prelude. It should have been 300 plus horsepower, but I like the looks. Yeah, I think Prelude Type R is coming. That'll be the 300 horsepower one, but this is just to, get them started. For me, Prelude's going to come down to pricing. If they price it right, I'm excited about it. If it's too expensive, then it's going to be the one right there. So and I see Austin saying the same thing there. Better be 35 grand or it's DOA. Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And, you know, Honda doesn't love doing base trims anymore. And I'm assuming the first pricing we're going to hear about is like some launch edition and, that being over 40. But I hope that once the hype and everything passes, I hope they come out with a regular lower trim, maybe not an LX. That'd probably be, too far for them to go. But, even if there was just like a lower trim of the Prelude, one that was a little less impressive, maybe has had cloth seats, that kind of stuff. If that, was 35, I could see it being a little bit justifiable, but really, it can't be more than a $2,000 premium over a comparable Civic hybrid in my mind. Like that's really where I think you got to cap it if you actually want to sell them. Now, if you want to just have it be some fun little thing you sell 2,000 of a year, then they can make it expensive and again try and do the same mistake Nissan did with the Z, where you squeeze all the people that have blank checks and are just excited about Preludes, and then have it fizzle after that. But I think loaded Civic hybrid, I could be wrong, maybe they changed it for 2026, but I think it was like 33. So that's why 35 makes sense. But see, at 35 like that, I mean, that's a loaded Civic hybrid with leather and heated seats and moonroof and the bows and all that. So if a base, so honestly, if they're gonna go base, like a base Prelude's got to be more like 30 or so for me to, because it's the thing to keep in mind too is it's going to be an uphill battle because you are trying to sell a coupe that has, still a pretty small back seat. And, yes, it has a hatch. So it's, a little more practical than a Mustang or something maybe, but like, it's a hard sell. And, putting a huge premium on it for no extra performance, really, I mean, yes, it's going to handle better, which is the other little tangent I'll go on for a brief second here. I'm excited about the Type R suspension. That sounds great, but maybe the suspension required the brakes, but why do we have Brembo gigantic Type R brakes on a vehicle with 200 horsepower? That is the most overkill, lopsided, braking package I think ever equipped to a car. That'd be like, Nissan selling a Nissan Kicks with Z brakes or something. Like, why do you need all that braking power? It's just ridiculous. So that's a strange inclusion. So I mean, it's going to handle amazing, and maybe it'll set like a record for how fast it can brake. But like, outside of those two things, like, there's no advantage over a Civic hybrid. And Civic hybrid is so practical with the giant hatch, the big back seat. I don't see it doing well, especially it doesn't sound like they're really shooting down the rumors of, the expensive ones. So I really hope I'm surprised, but I'm fearing the worst for the fate of the sales of Prelude. I like it in a vacuum, like many cars. There's a lot of cars where, you watch my reviews, I'm like, this is great in a vacuum. Now let's talk about the competition. And it's like, oh, wait, this thing is horribly priced. And when you look at it in that context, it sucks. And I'm worried that Prelude's going to end up being that. And maybe they'll fix it. Maybe they'll come out with a cheaper trim, or they'll lower the prices if they actually want to sell a decent amount in the future. But I think that's going to be the biggest problem with it. And while we're on the topic here, just so we don't have to come back to this later, we can just keep on going with that. And I will get back to the other questions here previously. So let me see where. Yeah, I see Austin says the Honda keeps kneecapping its performance cars. I just don't get it. Yeah, me neither. Let me see the other Prelude related comments. Luke says rumors Prelude pricing is 35 to 38. Yeah, 35 is. It's a stretch. I think it could work at 35, but again, I still am skeptical after the first year or two. But maybe, they're going to raise all the Civic prices here, and that won't be crazy. That's also important, the context of the other things and how everything else is going to be raised in price. But I mean, you can still get a BRZ for, right around 31, I think. That's a real sports car. Prelude is a nice sports coupe, but it's not a real sports car. And that's the other thing is, you're going to have BRZ and G86 that are going to run circles around it with more power, a manual option, obviously worse fuel economy. But again, this car is not marketed to people that, are looking to get 50 mpg most likely. because they're already driving Priuses and they're not buying a sport coupe. I mean, again, there's probably a tiny sliver of a pie that is excited about that, but not the average enthusiast. And so, yeah, I don't see it being successful. I mean, how much is a Mustang EcoBoost now? I mean, that's another one. If you're talking Grand Touring coupes, you can get an EcoBoost for, what are they, 35, 40 for a base one, something like that. Now, I mean, so if Mustang's in the same league with 300 horsepower and more space, maybe the backseat, I think my buddy Jared at Carbuzz said the backseat of the Prelude is maybe a little bigger than Mustang, but, probably not appreciably, larger. So, yeah, I mean, look how Mustang's even struggling, even, at that price point. So if Mustang's already struggling, I mean, yeah, you got the advantage of high MPG, but we're in times of cheap gas, most likely. I mean, we'll see, Trump could screw things up and gas could go to, $4 a gallon again or whatever. But like, I think it's not well timed as far as that goes either, and I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening with it, but yeah, I'm fearing the worst. And let me see other Honda comments before we move on here. YH thinks Brembo is just a selling gimmick now. I mean, they're big brakes. I mean, you look at Type R brakes; they are a nice upgrade over Civic Si and all that. So it's whether it matters whether it's got a Brembo badge on it or not, I don't know. But there are larger, bigger brakes, and again, I think are just still overkill. Justin also says, I feel like the Brembos on the Prelude are paving the way for the Type R soon, but who knows? Yeah, but then that should be saved for the Type R version, in my opinion. Because again, like this is also probably why it's going to be 40 grand, because you got brakes that are probably 5 grand on their own, and it's another decision. I don't understand. Why is Honda doing this? Like saying kneecapping their performance models. Like I don't know why do that. I hope that in the launch and the I mean, I'm not going to probably go on the first drive because Honda never invites me to anything, probably because I'm saying all this crap. But like, I just I hope that someone reports back with a good reason why they put gigantic brakes on something at 200 horsepower, because it's just. Surely everyone else thinks this is ridiculous. Maybe I'm the only one, but I don't think so. It's strange. And Luke says, so Prelude, Nissan Z, GR Corolla, Matt's rant vehicles. Pretty much. WRX is also, or any Subaru falls under that as well, and probably a few others I can't think of immediately. But I see Rishi says, I am fine with the Prelude powertrain as long as it's the base powertrain and they debut a more powerful Type R with a different engine soon. Yeah, I think they absolutely will. And so, a lot of the early hate is people who have too short of a memory to remember how Integra played out. Everyone was so mad about, Integra. And some people might still be mad because there's no two-door version or whatever. I think that's probably coming now based on Prelude. But everyone was mad about Integra, and then Type S came out, and that's a pretty awesome car. And I think, a lot of people that kind of redeemed Integra at least a little bit. And so, yeah, but I'm fine with the powertrain. Yeah, if they price it right, I don't care that it's the carryover powertrain. Sure, I'd like something more fun, but if it's just a coupe Civic, hybrid, great, sounds good. I'm happy to see a coupe, and if it's priced like that, then I think it's awesome, and I would have zero issues with it, if that's the way they package it. But I just don't think it's going to be that way. Austin says it should be 250 horsepower. Yeah, and I don't know how much bandwidth they have to go with that powertrain, because the highest we see is 204 in Accord. I think Accord is the only one to do 204. Maybe CRV does as well. I know Civic's just 200. I don't know if there's a difference in packaging as far as why Accord is able to get an extra 4 horsepower, but you would have thought Prelude is the sportiest thing. Like, let's make sure we at least give it a 204, not like 4 horsepower really makes much of a difference, but at least from a marketing standpoint, to say, this same powertrain in an Accord doesn't do more power. Another strange choice. And it's also like, I understand, okay, maybe they had to stick with that for packaging reasons, but then juice it in another way. Make the tune a little bit more aggressive, make the intake a little more aggressive, make the exhaust a little more freer flowing, or whatever you need to do to squeeze out another 5 horsepower or something. I know they have to worry about warranty and make sure that they don't push things too far, but like, I just don't understand why you can't do a little bit more. I don't think that's going to, cause warranty claims to skyrocket because, we changed the tune. So now it's got 10 or 15 or 20 more horsepower, and all of a sudden the thing's falling apart. Like, I'm sure it probably can handle it. But yeah, who knows? And let me see. Yeah, Vishal agrees about 35 is already pushing it, but it could work. Top trim Civic hybrid hatch is, I think, 33. Okay, that's what I thought too. And let me see. Any other Prelude comments before we move on? YH has 4-piston Brembos, and they're good. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Mustang's got great Brembos. I always appreciate it on the Bullet too. But Austin says he's happy to see a new coupe and a sea of SUVs. Absolutely, and that's why I want it to do well. This is why I'm so worked up about it, because I don't want this to be the case study that say, look, we tried a coupe and then it didn't work, and it's like, yeah, because you screwed up the packaging. Like that's, I think, the reason why I'm so worked up about this, because like if they do it right and they package it right, it can sell well and it can go on to be a legend. I think BRZ and 86 are a good example of this. Obviously, they're not, running away and selling 100,000 units a year or anything, but like, it's viable and it has, stuck around, and it's a really fun car and people really appreciate it. I see them fairly regularly. People are buying them and enjoying them. It's, I don't understand the decision making. That's just at the end of the day, again, like that's the thing I always have to remind myself of, is like the true insanity of the fact that, whatever this thing gets priced at, even in a best case scenario, just the fact that like, whole committees of people, whole boardrooms, whole engineering departments all agreed, yes, we should put gigantic brakes on a car of 200 horsepower. Everyone gave that a thumbs up. Everyone high five. All right, great decision, guys. Go get at it. And like that's the culture. And I don't know if it's an echo chamber, because I know a lot of car companies, there is an echo chamber of no one can speak up to say no. This doesn't make sense, and they follow the lead, and whoever the lead is that has these bizarre ideas, no one shoots them down. I don't know if it's something like that, or I love to hear the justification for it, but it just I don't know, it really makes no sense. And I mean, you even look at other Japanese cars, because you could say maybe it's a cultural difference or something, but you look at other Japanese stuff, they don't go crazy on brakes. I mean, it took them a couple of years to even come out with bigger brakes for the 86 and the BRZ, with these extra packages and the TS and stuff. So braking, it's not like that's like, a Japanese thing to have huge brakes on a slow car. So I don't get it. So anyway, Wyatt says, but the Honda has VTEC. Does it even have VTEC? I can't remember. Does the hybrid motor have that? I don't know if it does. I think they all just have like some kind of variable valve timing, but not necessarily like actual VTEC. So I know you're joking, but yeah. And thank you for the super chat again, YH. But yeah, Austin says maybe they could have bumped up the power on the electric motor assist. Absolutely. And I mean, and Honda has shown off their new electric motors, and this is something that's, I mean, maybe this is something we'll see for like a next generation Prelude or a mid-cycle refresh where they, swap in a new electric motor. But I thought I remember hearing that, like in Japan, they showed off a next generation hybrid system that is more powerful because of a stronger electric motor, because that stuff's all advancing. And that motor that's in the Prelude is the same old thing they've had. I mean, I think it's a second generation version, but it's the same old thing they've had since the last gen CRV hybrid. So like, yeah, I just, again, this is their flagship. This is their halo. And you're phoning it in and not putting cutting edge stuff, and you're making it expensive. It just yeah, it's annoying. And Luke says, I feel like Honda is gaslighting us. We offered a coupe, but no one bought it. You didn't offer it the right way. Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. That's my thoughts. And Chad says, I love the Integra S, but when you have to put that much engineering in front wheel drive, I don't know. When I saw your review, you said I'm going to turn it and floor it, and then saw a dent in the guardrail. Yeah, I mean, they've done a very good job of managing torque steer for sure. And that's one thing between that and Type R, even last gen Type R, the way that it really sucks you through the corner and really, fights that, it's really impressive. They've worked out most of the torque steer. In the wet, all bets are off, but when it's dry, it's really very well done. So, but I think they have kind of reached a limit there. I think this is why, they're kind of trying to preserve the hierarchy they have with power, because they can't compete on horsepower, especially with the electric stuff or with just anything that's all-wheel drive that's gas even. You have only so much bandwidth you can go with front-wheel drive before it just gets silly. Um, this is why Golf R is has gone all-wheel drive and has always been all-wheel drive because, to put down power well, that's kind of what you need once you get, a little over 300 horsepower there. But yeah, so I mean, we'll see what the future holds. It sounds like they're going to have Type R's in an electric era, but obviously that's probably put on the back burner for a while now. They won't have to really work on that too hard until the 2030s. But yeah. Anyway, I see Dan says offering the lower performance trim for any car first is the wrong way around. Drop the best one first and then introduce the lower trims after the enthusiast version has brought market excitement. That's a good way to do it. Unfortunately, for a lot of cars though, that's not the way they're able to do it. I don't know if it's just not realistic or if it's, especially when we're talking about stuff that shares bones with other things. I think that makes it a little trickier as well. I know Prelude is its own thing, but this is why I think Type R for Prelude might be a little different than just a Civic Type R port over of powertrain, because it just seems to me like if they are, trying to kind of position Prelude as this electrified thing, ditching the electrification for a Type R, to me, it's just from like a marketing, kind of standpoint, I feel like it would be a little bit of a switch that would be kind of hard to justify. So I don't know if maybe Type R will have some kind of electrification or something for Prelude, and that one will actually be the cutting edge one that's introducing some new tech and upping performance beyond what we've seen before. I don't know. It sounds like we might not have much longer to wait, because I think it seems like they are teasing a potential Type R version for the Tokyo Auto Salon here, Tokyo Motor Show in I think November. So I'm hoping we maybe see something then, and that'll But you're right. I mean, it's kind of again making everyone mad and then trying to redeem yourself later on. But yeah, it's interesting. We'll see what happens. But I mean, even like I think WRX for the past few generations, you had WRX come out first, and then STI was after that, right? And I feel like that's usually the way it goes. Maybe there's a few examples I'm missing. But anyway, yeah. Well, let's I guess move on. Dan is asking though if they've officially announced Prelude Type R. They haven't announced it. They haven't even recognized that that's a thing or said anything about it. But it looks like in the one teaser image for Tokyo, there's two sleek cars under sheets. I think they're saying one could maybe be like, a possible new NSX or something, and then the other one could maybe be Prelude Type R. We'll have to see. But anyway, thanks for letting me rant there a little bit, guys. Hopefully not too annoying here. And let me see, back to where we were with some member questions here. And I think I'm going to try, we're only 33 minutes in, but I'm going to make sure I don't get too far behind tonight so that we're not making people wait too long for their member questions, then going back and answering the non-member ones here a little bit later on for those who want to stick around. But let me see. So DC Texas though says it's been feeling like fall here in Dallas. Wish we were back in the Berg. Yeah, it's one nice thing about the Northeast, especially, as you have that fall weather, the trees changing colors. It's a very fun time to be in the Northeast, and whenever fall hits for sure. But I'm glad you're getting a little bit of that taste in Dallas as well. Hopefully you're okay with that. I enjoy fall. Hopefully you guys do too. But Chad says we have a local couple that has matching Lambos. They have them wrapped, so his looks like Mario and hers is the princess from Mario Kart. So I guess that was my spot. Well, that's fun. That's pretty cool. And Luke says, I'm disappointed with the Prelude. He loves the Sportback design, but wish they did a manual hybrid or 2.0T with 252 horsepower from the previous gen Accord with a manual. Yeah, and I don't know that 2.0T, if that motor is even going to stick around. I think, we have the variant of it in RDX for however long that sticks around. But otherwise, because it's not an MDX, it's not an Integra. And there's nothing else that Honda has that runs that anymore, right? So that's probably a motor that they're not interested in keeping around if there's, basically just RDX that still uses that motor. But I agree. It would have been cool for sure. And Raphael says 2 weeks until I'm off for a 7-state motorcycle trip. I'm ready now. That's awesome. Well, didn't you? I thought I remember maybe it was like last year. Did you do something like that last year where you did a long trip on the bike? That's awesome. Hope you enjoy it. And yeah, that's going to be beautiful, especially this time of year. You can see all kinds of beautiful fall weather. And yeah, I hope you enjoy that. That's awesome. Colby says, dang, Matt, I was kind of waiting for a Friday weekly update so you could tell us about the Prelude. It's too bad about the weekly updates. Yeah, I know. I wish I could have kept them going. Yeah, it's one of those things that I was thinking about like hanging on to them until YouTube started doing this hype thing. I don't know if you guys have seen hype. It's something that now it's rolled out to the US where it's kind of like Reddit where you can give the gold and upvote stuff in a way. There's a hype leaderboard now. It's not for everyone. I actually haven't seen it myself, but I've been getting notifications that like I'm starting to get a few hype points from whoever is eligible to do that right now. But there's a separate leaderboard. It's kind of like the trending page that YouTube used to have, but it's supposed to be for channels under 500,000 subscribers, where you can hype their videos and it gets kind of noticed a little bit more and stands out from the usual algorithm and recommendations and all that, for people looking for up and coming channels or channels that are underappreciated or whatever. And so you can hype, certain videos. And I was thinking, maybe, since everyone is so passionate about the weekly updates that, with the hype thing, that would have maybe, brought a new audience possibly, but I wasn't able to keep them up, hanging on until hype finally started to roll out here this fall. But yeah, that's another way to help if you ever feel like, a video is not getting enough views, whether it's me or somebody else. You can now have the power soon-ish, I think, to hype stuff, and especially if it's under 500,000 subscribers, that really helps to boost them. And they're changing the ranking, so it's like if you hype one of my videos, since I'm so close to 500,000 subscribers, it won't bump me as much as it will someone who's really small. So it kind of multiplies the points depending on how many subscribers you have. But that's going to be another way to help you guys, to have some more say in who actually succeeds beyond just, liking, commenting, subscribing, all that kind of usual stuff. It's a more active way to actually boost a video on your end and kind of decide what becomes, popular, at least on that hype page, which I think is a really cool way to put the power back in the viewers' hands. And so I'm excited for that. But that was really like the last hope I had, and YouTube was just taking forever to roll that feature out. So I was just like, I can't hang on and be spending 2 days to make, under $100 on each of those weekly updates. It was just too hard. But that's why we have these live streams to chat about, car news and stuff. And yeah, I just scrolled through quickly. I just saw Mercedes just revealed the new EQC or GLC, electric thing. And man, the screen inside, the giant grill they put on it, Mercedes has so lost their way, in my opinion. It's kind of crazy. But anyway, we can talk more about other car news here later, but I'm going to keep going through the questions and comments here. So Fishy Tank Land says, love your recent video on the 230i. I'm thinking of a 330i or a 230i. Is the 230i a more pleasurable driving experience to live with a 4-seater two-door? It will be 2 car seats at times. I mean, if you have 2 car seats, that's going to be hard in a 2-door. Yes, you can do it if you really, really, really want to coupe. But I mean, if you make life easier on yourself, if you're interested in that, I would just say go for the 4-door. I'm a firm believer in living in the moment and, enjoying things because you never know about tomorrow. But this is one of those cases where hopefully there will be time later to have the 2-door. If you have 2 car seats, hopefully, your kids will be bigger and able to, ride in the back more easily in the future. At least wait till they're in boosters, booster seats, and then you can throw those in the back a little bit easier than full-blown car seats. Because the back seat is actually smaller than last Gen 2 series. So if you're going to go 230, I'm assuming you're shopping maybe new, but you might actually have better luck going for last Gen 230i, or it might allow you to go up to like an M240i or something like that if you go last gen, because you're going to have a bigger back seat, also bigger. It's a little bit more of a higher roof, I think. So a little bit more of a bubblier shape will be easier to live with, for getting kids in and out. But yeah, I don't think the 230 is a more pleasurable driving experience over 330i. 330i is still a really great car, and I mean, I mean, I think 230. If you didn't have to worry about the car seats, sure, 230 would be probably my choice. But for your circumstances there, and even my own having just one car seat to put in, it'd be tough to do. I mean, you can do it. I was prepared to do it in the Bullet, and I'm prepared to do it in the Fiat if I need to. But yeah, it's better to just have four doors, I think. Mr. 705 says, "Hey, Bet, my spot was a newer Bentley Continental. Very nice. Those are always fun to see." And okay, Spaces says, "Yeah, what I was talking about earlier was the Honda A City. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but okay, I wasn't crazy. So that is what it's called. Yeah, I think that's what I saw. Not sure because I don't think it actually had a badge on the front. But it was very cool to see a K truck around here. And Jack, thanks for stopping by. Chad says a young man that works for me got his first car, a Genesis Coupe. I had to show him how to put air in his tires, but he's so proud of it and loves it. That's awesome. That's what it's all about, though, And kudos to you for helping him with the first little lesson in car maintenance, and hope they enjoy it. And Ryan says, "Hey, Matt, my spot was a neon yellow Lotus Evora yesterday. Very nice. I'd like to know what you make of the new Prelude." So yeah, we obviously covered that. I don't understand all the hate it's getting. Yeah, I mean, like I said, if the price is right, I love it. I think it's going to be great. It's honestly even a car like I would be interested in if the price is right. Now, obviously, I'm not buying anything for several years. And I may keep the Fiat, for a long time. But, that's a car, if it has all the same great driving characteristics as Civic Hybrid in a cool coupe form, getting good fuel economy and I think that would be a really fun car. I really like that idea. And, it's a welcome change from everyone else just doubling down on like more horsepower, and lighting everything on fire here that we can, for the next 3 years. But, so I like the premise of Prelude if they price it right. And let me see. B. Mitchell says, "Admit it, you troll dog on cars and bids in your spare time." Spare time is a funny idea. I don't have. I wish I had spare time. That would be a funny use of my spare time if I did have it. To just be on cars and bids like heckling. Or whatever, that'd be funny. But no, after being a victim of far too many trolls in my YouTube career, I would never troll anyone else's channel, even if I don't agree with the way they do things or the things they say. I wouldn't be a troll. But let me see. Danny says, "I forgot my sort of 90s Mopar spot, a final gen Plymouth Neon. Never thought I would see one of those." Nice, that's cool. Yeah, at least around here, they sold a lot of the Plymouths. One of my neighbors, this goes back probably 15 or 20 years, had a Plymouth Neon actually in purple. And I saw a bunch. I mean, they've all mostly disappeared at this point. But yeah, very cool you saw one. And the OKS Basis says, "There's a guy here in my town with a Honda Step Wagon and would love to have one in the garage." Yeah, I think that'd be so cool. If I needed a little runaround thing, a K car would totally be a fun idea. I mean, the Fiat is kind of that. If I wanted something that wasn't electric, but and also, the thing with those is, again, you got to have the cash, and like I don't have like the $5,000 spare to just even buy a cheap K car, but that would be that would be a fun thing if you have the spare actual cash and you buy cars in cash on a regular basis. That would be one of the things that would get my money. I think is something old Japanese thing, from Gran Turismo. Would be really fun. And let me see. B. Mitchell says, disconnecting the battery equals the ultimate Control Alt Delete. Absolutely, that's it. And Raphael says, "I saw my first Lucid this morning. I don't know which model, but they're very attractive cars." Yeah, I think they look great too. I absolutely love Lucids. I've never driven one, so I don't know how they drive, but I love their efficiency. I mean, I think they were the first to do 4 miles per kilowatt hour, which is very impressive, and they're actually pushing, the envelope on that, and really, innovating. They kind of remind me of the good days of Tesla when they were actually exciting and innovative and really kind of pioneering and forging a new path. I think Lucid is kind of that now, that's. I think they're great, and that's why, Jason Fenske of Engineering Explained, he swapped his Tesla for a Lucid, also because Elon screwed his wife's job over and just did all kinds of other stupid stuff. But But yeah, I'm very happy to see that he got a Lucid. I'm excited to see his ownership experience with it. And we have a few around here. Actually, there's a neighbor that has an Air, and yeah, they're always great to see. And let me see. Michelle says, I live in North Carolina, so no rust here. That's awesome. Glad that yeah, you don't have to worry about that and able to see some of those cool cars that are still on the road. And Zachary, thanks for stopping by. He says, spotted a 2020 Toyota 86 Kona edition this week. Pretty cool. Very nice. Yeah, the green with the tan leather, right? Yeah, that's definitely one of the better combos for those. Although, as much as I love dark green, the purple color you can get on the BRZ for this year is a really nice combo too. And actually, you can get that on WRX as well. But and I see Michael was asking about Prelude as well. I'm glad we answered that. YH says 007. Those numbers are copyrighted by the MI5. I'm not sure what we were referencing there, but I do love 007. And Austin says, hey man, I went to a local car meet and they had a screen used Fast and Furious green Eclipse, complete with the cast signatures and 2 bottles of NOS. Wow, that's awesome. That's very exciting. I've only seen clones. I don't think I've ever actually seen any of the real screen used ones. But that's awesome. That's so cool. I'm a big sucker for movie cars. That's very exciting. I'm glad you got to see that, Austin. And Vishal says, thoughts on the electric GLC and the iX3? Yeah, so I mean, like I just referenced a little bit a few seconds ago there, and so I know this is way behind. So you asked the question before I answered, but yeah, electric GLC. I mean, some are saying it's got impressive specs. I don't think GLC really wows me that much. It's what, like 354 miles of range. I mean, certainly better, and a nice little advancement over, most of the mainstream luxury EVs right now. But I think iX3 isn't that at like 400 miles of range? And it's also important to keep in mind, I think both of those are talking about WLTP range, which means they'll be actually lower, once they hit the EPA. So especially the GLC, if that's, mid 300s with EPA, testing, I'm sure that would end up putting it probably low 300s, which is right smack dab. I mean, we got 307 miles in the Lyric. So that's not special to me really. And GLC again, just man, that front end. If you guys haven't seen it, good grief, it's bad. I mean, maybe some of you like it. I don't know. Let me know if you do. But it's just like, I don't know. Mercedes is almost getting to the point of BMW. As crazy as it is now that I just saw the GLC tonight, I think I actually like iX3 better. And iX3, I still don't love it. I think the thing about the iX3 that kind of bothers me, it's pretty close to being actually okay. But the first time I said that about BMW in a while. But like it has those little skinny nostril grills, which I know is historical. I personally never thought the 2002 or the 3.0 CSL actually were great looking cars. Probably a very unpopular opinion. I can hear the boos through the internet. But I don't, I mean, I know that's their heritage. A lot of people do like it. So I'm in the minority there, I'm sure. But like, I think that if they had just brought the grills so they were flush or angled like outwards instead of inward, because if you look at the front bumper on the iX3, there's like two like divots, like scoops, where the grill is like pushed backwards, so it's angled. I think it's downward. Maybe it's actually flat, but like I think if they would have curved it out a little bit so that it's on a little bit of an angle or concave in some way, I think that could have maybe been a little bit better. It just, I still can't. It's still all these modern BMWs still like, to me they give me like Dracula, like Halloweeny, like bat vibes with those like little skinny nostrils. I don't know why, but that's just. But it's not bad. If you had to, force me to get one or the other, I'd probably take iX3 over GLC because I think BMW actually finally did an interior that isn't repulsive. Like X3 is just terrible in my opinion, but iX3 not bad. And I can kind of get behind the whole little, projection thing at the base of the windshield. It has a regular touchscreen still. And it's really good as far as again efficiency seems really good, and there I think over 400 miles. So I think iX3's got them beat pretty good at Mercedes. I think Mercedes has just lost their way so badly. And I was reading the article about the GLC, the electric GLC tonight, And again, this is a decision where an entire boardroom, multiple people are like, yeah, this is a great idea. Let's do this. The GLC, it has Microsoft Teams, which I don't know why anyone thinks that video conferencing in your car is one, a good idea, or two, even wanted by anyone. Does anyone want their work to be following them in the car? To the point where you have to video, it's one thing if you got to call in or something, like that's bad enough. But then to have video while you're driving, like I feel like, because here's the thing with on the GLC, they said that whenever you're driving, due to laws, at least in Europe, you're not allowed to have the video being shown to the driver, but the camera will still be working. So all your boss and all your coworkers can watch you drive while you're the poor bastard that's stuck on a Microsoft Teams call while you're driving and trying to have a little bit of separation from work. And they're all staring at you driving, and you have to drive cool as a cucumber because you can't be like, mad and flipping people off if you got this camera in your face for, your Microsoft Teams. And I think it's not even just that. I think it's Skype and whatever the other one is, Cisco, WebEx, or whatever it is. I'm not in the corporate world, so I don't know all the crap they use. But like who said please? I mean, maybe Mercedes employees or something, if they have no work-life balance and they just always want to be followed by their boss, even in their car on camera. But like, who wants that? Like, again, maybe I'm just not the right target demographic for that. Maybe there's a lot of people that are excited about that. I have no clue. But like, it's just like, so I feel like these are the kinds of things we're going to be writing articles and videos about in 5, 10, 15 years, like how hilariously bad this was. And the GLC also makes the same mistake Mercedes has been doing, where the entire front is screened for the gauge cluster, and like they think that's luxury, and maybe to some people it is, but like there's like hardly any nice materials from what I saw, at least on the dash and stuff. It's just a screen, and like that's, I don't know, just to me it's not luxury. So yeah, it's interesting, but I can happily say that we are very pleased with our Lyriq purchase, and I don't think Cadillac is worried in the slightest. Maybe they're worried a little bit about the range and stuff, but I think GM is, they're going to get there too. Maybe Mercedes and BMW beat them to the punch a little bit on that. Again, we'll see how the range actually shakes out. But I mean, compared to the Lyriq, which I think, again, I'm subjective opinion, but I think Lyriq looks far better, has nicer interior with real metal switches, with leather everywhere, a screen that does everything you need to do without it dominating the whole experience. And again, you don't have to wince every time you look at it in the parking lot. I just, I don't know. Anyway, I'm happy to hear what you guys have to think about that as well. Chad, thank you so much for a super chat. He says, any mods / features that you don't understand or hate, like coal rollers for me? Yeah, I hate people that roll coal. That is just completely like classless and trashy and annoying, and just, I've never seen an individual I would consider classy or like a nice person that's rolling coal. Maybe I'm sure there's maybe 2 or 3 of them out there, maybe, but I don't know. I see DC Texas is answering that question as well. It says overly negative cambered rear wheels on any rear-wheel drive car. Yeah, overly done camber is another one of those things that makes zero sense. That one, at least to me, is a little bit more of a style thing that doesn't shove soot in people's faces. So, if people want to be running around slammed and, busting oil pans and having their tires, wear out at the edges after 1,000 miles and stuff, I mean, knock yourself out. Obviously I don't, I don't have any appreciation for it, but that's at least harmless to me, aside from maybe the safety issue of them spinning out because they have zero rear traction. But, aside from that, like again, live and let live. If that makes you happy, go for it. There's actually a Civic around here, a current generation Civic that has just been like wrecked with like absolutely like slammed to the ground. Like, I don't know how this guy isn't like, his underbody must just be a complete war zone. But like, I mean, it's, he's got the body kit on and stuff. And I mean, if it was in a decent height, I think it actually looked cool, but like it is so low that, I mean, if there's more than an inch of snow on the ground, the thing probably wouldn't go anywhere because it would just turn into a snow plow. It's just crazy. So that, yeah, I agree with that. That's not something I'm super excited about. And other things, though, I'm trying to think of other features I hate. I don't know. I can't think of anything quickly. If something pops into my head, I'll be sure to rant about it later. But I don't think there's anything I can think of. But it's a great question, and yeah, rolling coal is definitely probably the top thing. I also just it's not a mod or a feature, but I still roll my eyes every time I see a Cybertruck. And anyone who has questionable stickers, those types of things, I always roll my eyes at too, especially the again, the ones that just have no class. Just not my vibe. But thank you for the super chat, Chad. And I see also Vishal is commenting on that and says fart can exhaust. Not sure how they sound good to anyone. Yeah, I mean, that at least that's a little bit more subjective, because there are some where it's like, okay, like who was I saw someone like this the other day and I was like, I can't remember what it was. Oh, there was a guy who had a Subaru Impreza that drove past me, regular Impreza with a giant STI wing on it and big exhaust, and he was ripping around and seemed very happy. And like, trying to give someone like that the benefit of the doubt. Sure, they maybe could have gotten an older WRX or something, but they got stuck with an Impreza for one reason or another, and they're enjoying it to the max. And if they always just wanted that flat four sound, and didn't care if it wasn't fast, it does that for them. And also stuff like that, like an Impreza has much cheaper insurance than a WRX or STI, so maybe they couldn't afford the insurance. So there's those types of things where I try not to be judgy, because again, everyone has different circumstances they have to work with, as far as why they chose. Even if it's they could have gotten a WRX that was the same price, it was older, maybe it's the insurance thing, or they couldn't find something fast enough or whatever. So there's those types of things where I'm like, okay, you do you, that's great. But yeah, but the fart can exhausts on older bone stock Civics and stuff like that. To me, I have no real issue with that, and I can say I will admit that I was guilty of that with my first car. Little Subaru Impreza Outback Sport 1997, put a giant Apexi axle back exhaust, which is a cooler way of saying a muffler, on that car. And I think I might have made the video public whenever it was an old video that I uploaded, probably even at that point, it was 10 years ago, and that was probably old even back then. But I think, or you know what it was? If you look back at a video, I think it's called I Ran a Carfax on All My Old Cars. I think I talk about my first car in that, and I think I included the clip of it revving when I first had that exhaust put on that thing. And my coworkers heckling me in the background because they thought it was even stupid back in 2007. But yeah, so I am guilty of that, and I can say as a 16 or 17-year-old, especially again growing up in the Fast and Furious era, and again 2007 was still sport compact, galore, and everyone having fart cans on everything. I enjoyed it. I'm sure lots of people rolled their eyes at me as well. I had a good time with it, and so that's why I think I remember when I was there too. So I don't really judge people for that mod in particular. But obviously there are times I know where I'd get annoyed if, especially whenever our daughter was younger and, someone would race by with a loud fart can and I'd be like, I'm trying to get the baby to sleep, things like that. But, I think I can, I can give a pass for fart cans personally. And I see Vishal says, because I live in North Carolina, Carolina squatted trucks. Yeah, that's so weird. Dan's saying the same thing. North Carolina has it. Yeah, that's strange. Now they're putting $200 worth of lights in the rims of a $400 truck. Interesting. Lighted wheels. That is something. I can't remember who it was. Someone was asking an automotive executive recently, like, do you think, lighted wheels are going to be a thing, and is that ever actually going to be a production thing? And they were saying, they think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. but they're like, yeah, like lighted wheels will be coming probably for the EVs again to further like, ooh, this is cool and electric. But like, I think that is going to be probably one of the new trends you will see. Maybe it'll hold off for the next few years. Maybe not. I don't know. But I think especially once you get into the 2030s, we may see more and more of that to try and again amp the visual appeal up of some of these cars. But yeah, the squatted trucks, obviously we don't see them around here. I've seen a few of them in my travels whenever I've been in those areas, but yeah, that doesn't make much sense. I feel like that would be horrible to drive too, because like it makes your visibility so much worse because you're like pointed at the sky, right? And how do you see over your hood? It's hard enough in a truck already, and then to have that, and again, like it makes it drive worse. It's a safety issue. Yeah, I don't know. Another very unpopular opinion, but I feel like if there's things that are safety issues, that is where I draw the line personally on mods. If and this is, I mean, it's really hard to do with lifted trucks because I understand the need for high ground clearance with Jeeps and stuff like that. But I really, I give even any lifted vehicle, I very much stay away whenever I'm driving around because you've probably seen all the horror stories and stuff of there's no bumper beam there. You're driving straight into someone's tow hitch to the face. If you ever bump into them, and same thing goes with these squatted trucks. If you got the bumper pointed in the wrong direction and it's just sitting there and it's just acting like Pac-Man gobbling up the car in front of it, you're again, their bumper is going straight into the rear window of the car in front of it instead of the bumper or the trunk where it's supposed to be or whatever. It's just it's so hard to do again because of the off-roading culture and the fact that there's no way to properly do it fairly. But like I really wish that like if your bumpers are not at stock height, especially if you want to have it lower and then you're only risking your own life, whatever. But whenever it's higher and you're putting other people at risk with having these gigantic grill guards that are, again, I'm like staring up at the grill guard, and things like that. Like that's just like where you get to the point where these are safety issues. And you have any one of these people, do a minor fender bender that usually would be oh, sorry, we bumped here. Let's exchange information in the end. And it turns into a deadly crash, even at low speed. So that's the thing that I really, don't love. But again, like you can't make lifted vehicles illegal because there's just too many of them. So I don't know how to fix that problem, but like, that's why I don't love lifted culture in general, because to me, it's just you're risking everyone's lives and also your own because you're also making it more, top heavy and all that stuff. But, again, if you're risking your own life, I don't care. But whenever it puts other people in danger, like that's just not cool to me, And again, there's other people that do it in a more reasonable manner. And there's middle grounds to be had in gray area, but like these things that are lifted to the sky, like you shouldn't be able to legally drive a monster truck on the road. Like that just seems insane to me and something that only happens in America pretty much. And it's just, again, good old American culture. Anyway, so chat says coal rolling squatted trucks with super camera for the win. That's it. That's the worst combo pretty much. I see Tastebud says he hates overly bright aftermarket lights on lifted trucks. Yeah, they blind everyone. That's the other thing is, yeah, it's blinding you. And that blinding is actually, another safety risk. If you are, again, these insane light bars are so bright that it actually like gives you temporary blindness when you pass them. And then, I mean, that's another, it's just, I could I could go into more stereotypes and more other things, but I'll keep it there. But yeah, it's not nice. It's just straight up like it's not considerate and and it's also just so overboard. Like, especially these lifted trucks with street tires on them, like they're not actually doing off-roading. I understand, styling is subjective and everyone has their own, sense of what looks cool and stuff. But again, like to me, it's just about safety, and maybe I'm boring like that. And I know car culture has never really been about safety, and that's not what the mod scene's about. But to me, like if you're endangering the family in the minivan just so you can look cool, like that's just to me, I'm not behind that, But anyway, Let me see. Dan says, I can't say much. My 124 Abarth basically has a straight pipe with a one tiny resonator, and I'm 43. I think it's great. I mean, again, to me, exhaust sounds are different because, everyone, again, has their taste of what sounds good, what doesn't sound good, what they enjoy, what they're able to have, all that kind of stuff. And like, I think your 124 Abarth probably sounds fantastic in my opinion. If you blew past me, I'd be like, oh, that's sweet. That would like make my day of seeing that, go flying by. I know a lot of other people would be mad about it, but like, so again, it is subjective, but like that's something I get. I have no issues with that. I think that's totally fine. I think most enthusiasts, don't really have any issues with most stuff. I think it's just the fart cans on like crappy cars is the thing that I think a lot of people shaking their heads at. But even then, they're enjoying their crappy car. That's what they have for whatever reason. And, if an exhaust makes them feel a little happier about their day, again, I say good for you, thumbs up. And again, at least it's not endangering anybody else. And OK Spaces, thank you so much for gifting 5 memberships. I really appreciate the generosity and happy to see a bunch of, I think, all new names they're able to get. And I think Jesse was one who was commenting earlier, so I'm happy he's able to get one to get that priority answering. And we'll keep on going. I'll go back to the member questions here, but just so we don't get too far behind, I'll make sure that we maybe skip some of the non-member questions here temporarily, and then we can have once we catch up, maybe have more people can get their non-member questions answered here. But I do want to give that priority answering because I know in the past I've kind of done everybody, and I know that means sometimes the members do have to wait a lot longer for their questions to be answered here. But Lance was saying West Coast Customs did lighted rims for an Audi R8 for the Tron Legacy premiere. The car couldn't be driven on them though; they had to be mounted at the event. That's cool. I think isn't there that new Tron movie coming out too? I'm curious if that encourages a new spike in lighted wheels. I think it'd be kind of cool. Another good way to again get eyeballs on your car if you want to stand out without bothering anybody else. Let me see. Young Lightfoot says, imagine having money and willingly paying for a Chrysler product. So reckless. I mean, I love my Fiat 500e. It's been great so far. And I mean, I think Stellantis makes a lot of really good stuff. They have their weak, moments in cars that aren't super impressive, but I think they make some good stuff too. And let me see here. So getting back to the questions. Oh, there's a little helicopter or something flying by there in the window. Anyway, so where were we here? Try and find my place. I see Danny's giving the info there on the school buses. I appreciate that. So the GM stuff is interesting. And then Cat for the one engine. Interesting. Thanks for sharing, Danny. And let me see. Patricia says, just saw an Alpha 4C, gave the guy a thumbs up, and he floored it after the next stop sign. It's awesome. 4Cs are really cool. I was just thinking about the 4C the other day. I think that'd be a really good track car because you have a carbon fiber monocoque in a small little car like that. To me, it would make it one of the safest track cars, especially, I mean, I don't know how it would work with roll cages and stuff, but as far as non-roll caged vehicles, carbon fiber monocoque is that really great, surrounding that really keeps things so much safer, and also just a really light, great little car. I only had a quick little drive in a 4C Spider many years ago and never was able to get one as a press vehicle, but man, I think the 4C is really cool, and hopefully by this point all the major issues have been figured out and fixes have been found, so that hopefully it's better now. I don't know, but and yeah, 4Cs are great. I never see 4Cs hardly ever anymore, but hopefully they're still out there doing well. They have started to appreciate it, I think, too. I think they're not as cheap as they once were, but I think they're still pretty cheap, relatively speaking. That's a great spot. And let me see here. Chad, thanks so much for another super chat. He says, older Fords, you can hold unlock on the fob and roll down all the windows, vice versa for the lock. Why did they stop? I love it on my Fusion with the Florida Sun. A lot of cars, I think, still do. It's not a very widely advertised feature, I think, because a lot of the car companies would rather have you do it in the app where you pay for data for the car and do it that way. But I think that's probably part of the reason why some quit doing it with the fob, because they can charge you for it with the app. But I think there are some. I feel like I was just hearing about this on another car recently that you can still do this. I can't remember what it is. I think Porsche still does it. Who else though? I feel like there's one or two others at least that still do that. I think actually our Cadillac does. I have to look into it, but I think there's a way to do it. See, Dan says BMW and Minis do that too, called convenience opening. Same with the sunroofs. That's it. Yeah, yeah, BMW and Mini. Okay, thanks, chat. Or thanks, Dan. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. Because I remember I was just in a something when last time I had a BMW or Mini press car. One of them I was able to do that. I can't remember what, but and also my old Mini, I remember I was able to do that too, which was cool. And let me see. DC Texas says you need to pay the $5.99 a month Windows Down subscription. Yeah, well, it's mostly just like to send the messages to the car from the app. You have to have the car connected to the internet, and that's the data package that they're all trying to sell. And that's why there's no CarPlay and Android Auto and all these electric GM vehicles, because they're hoping once that trial ends, they can make money off used car buyers, which is the nut they've been trying to crack for years. And that's how you do it is you sell them all these connected services and you make the car all connected, but it only works until, after the lease period or whatever. And then, you got to start paying for that, just like you pay for a data connection for everything else that you have that's connected. And they're hoping that they can, have that be a nice revenue stream here in the future. Once again, you get to out of those trial periods that most of them are currently in. But yeah, that's one of the big plans for extra revenue down the road. And B. Mitchell said that rolling down the windows with the fob was still a thing with my 19 Mustang GT. I like it. Yeah, it's a great feature to have for sure. And Chad says, I did accidentally sit on my keys during a thunderstorm. Not great. Man, that sucks. Hopefully you recognized it pretty quickly and the damage was pretty limited. But let me see here. So other questions, getting back to where we were here. Try and find my spot quickly. So Dave is asking if I ever drove a Fiero. If so, what did I think of it? I've never driven a Fiero. I'd love to try one someday. There's not many nice Fieros left to review that I've seen. Someone has one, feel free to offer it. I'd love to to drive one someday, but I've never driven one. Danny saying our township gave all three high schools 1 30-foot box truck. So we go from a little over 60 feet to only 30 feet. And we can't fit all of our front ensemble or pit instruments onto the one box truck. Well, hopefully better school funding comes someday. I know that's probably not something that's going to happen in the next few years, so you won't be able to appreciate it since I know you're a senior, you said. But hopefully for the people that come after you, someday there'll be better school funding. But let me see here. So where were we? Going to skip over the Prelude stuff we already talked about. B. Mitchell said he had a roommate when he was in the Air Force who had the new first gen Prelude. Back then they were just a small, more cramped rear package shelf only backseat Accord. Yeah, that's true. I mean, and even the styling was pretty close to Accord back then. So yeah, and that's the thing. Honda is very much good about sticking to historical framing and historical just packaging for their vehicles in a lot of ways. And they did this with Integra. It's exactly what the old Integra used to be, a nicer Civic. And I think, yeah, same thing with Prelude. I mean, I would say the Prelude was a little more cutting edge whenever you went to, they had one of the first applications of rear-wheel steering. And they had a few other little things that were just kind of different. So that's kind of, I guess, the quirkiness that's a little bit missing from the new Prelude. But yeah, like I said, I'm hoping it does well and they price it well. And Raphael says he had a third gen Prelude, so I hope this one does well just for the nostalgia. Yeah, I hope so. I really hope they do well. And let me see. JS is asking, do you think the powertrain in the CX-5 is better than a Honda CR-V powertrain? That comes down to what your preferences are. If you like a regular automatic, obviously Mazda's the way to go. If you, like CVTs, then CR-V is better. I mean, personally, yes, I like Mazda's powertrain better. It comes down to also the kind of driving that you're doing because the CRV has the turbo. So in around town driving, CRV is going to feel better. You're going to have more power at lower RPM, so you can just feel zippier around town versus the Mazda, which is going to be again naturally aspirated. If you don't go for the turbo version, naturally aspirated, you have to work that engine a little bit to get the revs up, and it's a whole process to kind of get more power versus a little bit of a quicker response there with the CVT and turbo combo and the CRV. CRV also drives really great too. I do love that, but CX-5 is also fantastic. So as far as just powertrains go, if you are a traditionalist that likes regular automatics, regular engine that's very much proven, I think CX-5 is probably the better way to go. But that doesn't mean, I think the CRV motor too has now been proven to be pretty good. There's a lot with several 100,000 miles on them now that seem to be going strong, really, solid vehicles. Again, I'm sure everyone's mileage will vary, but if you're meticulous about your maintenance and keeping on top of that, hopefully you will be able to, get just the same amount of life out of the motor as the Mazda. So yeah, I don't think there's any issues with that, but it just comes down to how you like the drivability, really. And let me see here. Chad, thanks so much for gifting a membership. I really appreciate that. And happy to see that Neil was actually able to get a membership here. And he just asked a question here. So we'll answer that one and then we'll go back to the other. So he says, would you recommend buying a 2016 to 2019 GT350 with no warranty? Heard the engine replacements can cost upwards of 25 grand. That's a good question. So I don't know, maybe you know better than I do as far as what Ford's extended warranty was, because I believe they put a longer warranty on the engine after all of the issues that they had. I think the thing too that's comforting about buying a used GT350 is with the new ones, it was terrifying because you didn't know if you got a good one or not. And, it was kind of a flip of the coin. But now it seems like the good ones and the bad ones should be pretty well separated. Like you should be able to, talk to the owner or look at the Carfax. And if the motor hasn't been replaced, and it's still in the original motor, then this is why buying private party is really nice for a GT350 versus most other cars where it doesn't really matter a whole lot. But especially with the GT350, if you can talk to the owner and say, hey, does this thing consume oil? I guess you have to find an honest owner. But, if someone can tell you, hey, look, it honestly does not consume oil and it's, got a decent amount of miles on it. Usually if they were going to go, they go fairly early. It's not, maybe things are different now, but I remember back whenever I was, following all that stuff, if it had gone 30,000 miles and it was still fine, you probably weren't going to have any issues. It seemed like it was fairly early on where they started to let go, and the good ones, just, they don't go later on. I'm sure there's an upper limit there. I don't know how long they last, but as far as regular, under 100,000 miles, it seems like if you find one that's been well maintained, good oil changes, good Carfax, no weird, maintenance stuff on the Carfax and all that, or again, you have an owner that tells you, hey, look, it's not consuming, because there are some GT350s that are, super tight, that don't, burn oil really. I know the owner's manual says a quart every 1,000 miles is normal or whatever, but it's definitely a riskier car. I'm not sure if there's a good Ford warranty that's available at this point for those. Maybe not. Maybe if you buy one used from a Ford dealer, like a certified one, if they do that for something that's 2019, I don't know, 2016 is probably too old for that, but there may be something there. I don't know if Ford does offer that, but if you can find one at a Ford dealer and they'll sell you a warranty, it comes down to your risk tolerance too, and how, if it's your only car and you can't get to work if that motor blows, then I think you should probably get something better. That's, more proven. There's still plenty of fun cars with great motors, that you don't have to be biting your nails every time you go for a drive. But if it's a fun weekend car and the motor blows and you got another 25 grand to spend and it's not that big of a deal, then obviously for someone like that, it's not something that would probably be that stressful. Go for it. So it really comes down to all those variables. So hopefully that helps you a little bit. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions, Neil. And welcome also to being a member. Thanks to Chad. And thank you so much again, Chad, for gifting the membership there. And hope you enjoy all the membership perks, Neil. And let me know if you have any follow-up questions there for sure. And CB Mitchell, thanks for chiming in here. He says 2019 and 2020s seem to be sorted out, but I still won't trade my pony for one. Too damn fuel thirsty for what I'd use it for. Insurance is also a nosebleed inducing and chest clutching experience. All right. Well, noted. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I didn't even think about insurance, but yeah, that's another thing that could make it a little pricier. And also the thing, Neil, the thing that's, I think if we were talking about a different car where that motor is really special but the other one's very mediocre, like for example C8, I think C8 Z06 is magical. C8, the motor is a little bit, this leaves a little bit to be desired. So in a case like that, I'd say, oh, you got to go for the Z06 over a regular C8. But if you're talking about Coyote versus the Voodoo motor, Voodoo is certainly more special, but Coyote is still a really good motor, and as B. Mitchell can attest to. But they are very reliable. There's people with well over 100,000 miles on their Coyote with no issues. It still has a 7,500 RPM red line. It's just the safer bet, and it's not like you're giving up that much. Yes, you're giving up some character. But even if you go for a Mach 1 S550, you get the transmission, the Tremec. So I would recommend, if that maybe a nice middle ground. If I were in your shoes and I really wanted the transmission, but I needed something a little bit less terrifying, maybe Mach 1 is worth a consideration, or Dark Horse, again, depending on what your budget is, because that has the Tremec too. So either one of those could maybe be a nice alternative. But I know GT350 is magical and very tempting as well. So yeah, and I see the follow-up here. He says, appreciate the membership. Been watching your videos for over a decade. I thank you so much for that. He says, your SS reviews made me buy a 2015 black SS and love it. Love your videos. Great insights on the GT350. Well, I'm happy to help. And thanks also B. Mitchell for the help there too. And yeah, best of luck deciding. And yeah, let me know if you have any other questions or comments, Neil. And thanks so much for the support all these decade plus years. And Chad, thank you for another super chat as well. He says, why put back seats in sports cars / supercars? Seems useless. And Lanswath has the correct answer. Yeah, it's insurance reasons typically. And also just there are some people that actually enjoy taking their kid along for stuff, or just transporting a friend in a pinch, things like that. Even I just saw actually the other day, driving around, there was an Infiniti G37 convertible, which is also a pretty rare spot. G37 convertible, and the dad was driving, and there was a kid in a car seat in the back there. Very cramped, small back seats, but it fits. You put the passenger seat all the way forward, and you can make it work. And it was just, him and his son there just driving down the highway, having a blast with the roof off. And I'm like, that's what it's all about. And that's why, I think it's great that some companies, offer that. And like even Porsche has made it an option now for the GT3 Touring to put the back seat back in that usually get removed in the GT3 transformation. And I personally, I love that. Like a lot of my dream cars on my lottery dream car wish list that unfortunately is going to have to continue to go unbought after not being one of the fortunate people to win the Powerball here this past weekend. But a lot of the cars on my list are like cars that have, or supercars, fun sports cars that have a back seat, like the GT3 Touring, like the Aston Martin DBS. I love that those have a back seat, just anything where it's a usable, slightly back seat that you can fit a kid in. And just, to be able to share those experiences, especially with, those younger kids that shouldn't be sitting up front. That's personally why I love that kind of stuff. I know that's again, very, niche kind of use case for them, but a lot of times it is, again, just insurance reasons. If you say it's a 4-seater, that's like, oh, okay, well, this isn't quite as crazy as if it were, some kind of little 2-seater thing. So that definitely is part of it. I'd be curious. I don't know. I've never cross-shopped like insurance rates for GR86 versus Miata. I wonder if Miata is a lot higher as a result. I know Miata drivers seem to be pretty safe people typically. But yeah, I'm not sure. That'd be an interesting one to see if that actually is a big help these days or not. But that's typically been always the reason. Yeah. Great question, Chad. Thanks for the super chat and for asking. All right, getting back to the questions here. Where were we again? So let me see. I think we're Sorry, it's always so hard trying to find where I left off here. So we talked about the CX5 here. Um, so we had more of the Prelude discussion here. So let me see. So yeah, I'm trying to scroll through the Prelude discussion here, and I'll find where we left off. I just don't want to miss any comments that might have been lost in the mix. So Fishy Tank Land's asking, how has your Fiat 500 been? Is the 230? Okay, yeah, we covered that. The Fiat's been great. Hasn't moved basically in the past month. I will be driving it here this week, actually. So I usually, it's kind of like the Bullet, where I try and get it out at least once a month or so, just so I don't get flat spots on the tires too badly. And it's just to kind of exercise it a little bit. But I actually I have one of the very rare use cases this week where it's like I'm really happy I have the Fiat because I need to go somewhere, and if I didn't have the Fiat, I'd be kind of in a pickle because Thursdays are now my swap days for press cars typically, and I need to take it out on Thursday. So I'm happy I'm going to have a little Fiat and I go on a little adventure with that. But Fiat's been great. Absolutely love it still. And I honestly wish I had more time to drive it and just had more opportunities to drive it. But I've been so well covered with press cars here recently that I haven't really had too much. But I may be reaching the end of press car stuff just temporarily here. I might be taking a break on some of them for a little bit in the fall. So we'll see. I might get the Fiat back to being a daily driver here soon. Let me see. And hopefully you caught your answer to the question earlier about the BMWs there, Fishy. And Theodore says, when you are in a cool car, you always give a little giggle when you start up and say it starts right up. Yeah, it's always fun, especially the loud ones and things like that, where it's definitely a little bit of a laugh every time they start up. Let me see. So I think, yeah, the other comments we were talking about there about exhausts and mods. I see Luke says, Raphael says every last week of September is the road trip. Gotcha. Okay. So I wasn't crazy. I remembered from last year. So I know you had a great time last year. I hope it's a great time this year too. Perfect timing for a nice road trip too. And Luke says, I will say one positive thing. I'm happy there's no 1.5T in the Prelude. That motor has run its course. I feel like Honda is ditching it and Acura is using it in the 80X and Integra, and that's a little backwards in my eyes. Yeah. I mean, I think the nice thing about the 1.5, if they would have put it in Prelude, is that would have opened up the manual. If you could have had Civic Si, stuff swapped in there. And I think that still 35 would be a hard sell, but like if you had that, then I think you would have gotten a little more excitement from people. And maybe they will still add that someday. I think there's room for all different versions, just like we see with Civic. We see, the 3 powertrains in Civic, actually 4. Why can't we have 4 powertrains, or at least 3 in the Prelude? I mean, honestly, I'd love to see a base like 150 horsepower Prelude like we see with Civic. I think there'd even be a market for that. People who just want the cool look and don't care if it's slow. I think that would also be a great way to lower the price tag. Make that under 30 grand. Have that be the one, again, for people who just don't care. Because I think that's also the thing people, especially car companies, often miss, is there's a lot of people that truly do not care if it's slow, and just want a cool look. And whenever you have these vehicles that do look cool, I think when you don't offer a slow version, it's a gigantic missed opportunity. I know for some of them, they want to preserve the prestige and stuff, and that's fine. But we're talking about Hondas. I think, why not have all 4 motors? They all fit, so why not do the Type R, do the 150 horsepower one, do the hybrid, and do the 1.5T with the manual for those who want the manual and can't spend Type R money, because that thing's going to be 50 grand for sure. Again, if we're doing a premium over Civic, and I think you could have one for everyone. You have one for the person who can spend 28, 29 grand. You have one for people who want to spend 50 on the ultimate one. That's, to me, the way I would do it, honestly. But again, maybe there's just some packaging issues or some other constraints that make that unrealistic. I don't know. And let me see. Dan says, we need a Matt meet and greet at Tail the Dragon this fall. That'd be fun. Why it's just never meet your heroes. That might be fair too. I mean, I think everyone who's mostly met me, I think actually everyone, I've never heard anyone not be happy to meet me. Hopefully I don't disappoint, but that's entirely possible. Actually, it's kind of funny. We were out shopping and I had someone who was who came up and was like, do I know you? And I never know, if it's just someone that's seen something else, or maybe is actually getting confused. I don't like to ever assume like, oh yeah, I'm on YouTube. So I'm just like, I don't know, like, where do you think you know me from? And kind of like, it's kind of like a guessing game for a minute. He's like, is your name Matt? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh yeah. And then, but he seemed happy to meet me, and came up and made a point to say hi. So, and that's what I love too. There's some people who every once in a while will say like, "Oh, I saw you, but I didn't want to say anything." And I always love when people come up and say hi. It's always great, even if I'm with the family or whatever. It's always fun to say hi, shake your hand, and it's always cool to put a face to some of the usernames and all that. So yeah, if anyone ever sees me out and about, or whatever, feel free to say hi. It's always fun. But as far as a meet and greet at Tail of the Dragon, I'd love to go to Tail of the Dragon. I've been meaning to go there for years, never made it. And I hope to go someday. Meet and greets are just hard because there's just so many things that go into that kind of stuff. And that's another thing where I don't have the time to do proper planning, and yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge. I've done a few in the past with Shell's help, where like we did our road trip to the Indy 500 back in 2019. And that was, amazing. But I mean, that meet and greet worked because it was also not just me, but it was like, Engineering Explained. We had Chris Fix, who was the main draw, obviously. Eric, the car guy, Humble Mechanic, all of us, showing up at a gas station and, all being able to publicize it, that got a decent turnout, but doing a lot of work. And then, I don't know how many people are, in whatever area I'm deciding to do the meet and greets in, but it'd be less of a meet and greet and more of like me just saying, hey, I'm going to be in this place and I have time, come grab a beer at this restaurant with me or whatever. Like, I think that's kind of the more realistic way, I guess, especially considering, the smaller fan base I think I have these days. If I were to do something, and that's what I've kind of, thought about doing things like that whenever I am, traveling on these car trips, with the media drives and stuff, but it's usually just like so tightly scheduled where I don't ever have any free time, or if I have free time, I'm stuck in my hotel room editing the next video that needs to go up for the next day or whatever, and things like that. Again, it always comes down to time for me, and I just never have the free time. So that's really, yeah, because if I was otherwise, I'm on these trips. It's actually kind of funny. I'm not going to give any details here because I don't, because I'm not sure what I'm about to say just yet, but I'm going to be in Oregon later this month, and I'm going to be there the same day that James May is actually going to be there because he's promoting the gin or whatever, and he's doing a free meet and greet. And I was going to be like, can I figure out a way to even get away just to like see James May from a distance in person? So I'm like, it's, even that, like, I desperately would have. It just sounds like I'm going to be flying out as it's like, and his thing's later in the day, and I will have already been home by the time, I'll be like landing back in Pittsburgh probably by the time he's doing his meet and greet in Oregon. So it's probably not going to work out. I've been like playing around with the idea of like, maybe if I can try and stay and catch a red eye, and maybe I can make it work, because I've always James May is like still one of my favorite celebrities. So I'd love to meet him someday, and I'm going to be so close. I'm hoping maybe I like cross paths with him in the airport or something. But yeah, but so even things like that, like I desperately want to see James May in person, and like even that, I don't think I'm going to be able to work out. So hopefully someday I get a little less busy and I'll be able to do more fun stuff like that. And Michelle says, my cousins bought a 2025 Camry XSE today after I sent them your review of it. Traded their 2016 Sentra for it. They're loving it so far. That's awesome. Well, I'm glad the video helped them, and I'm glad they're able to get a Camry. That's awesome. I always forget some places you can buy cars on Sundays. Everything around here is closed. So every time people are like, I bought a car, and I'm like, what? It's Sunday? But that's awesome. And yeah, hopefully they love it. Obviously, Camry is such a great car, and it's also a very easy one to recommend, because they're so reliable and they're generally just so good that you usually don't have anyone that gets mad about buying any Toyota for that matter. So it's always a safer recommendation for friends and family. But no, Camry is great, so I hope they love it, and congrats to them for the new car. And Chad says, I just watched Everyday Driver before this and thought the same thing that Dan said about a meet and greet. That'd be fun. Maybe they're doing one. That's cool. But I think it really makes sense. I know back in the day, a couple of years ago, Savage East was talking about having me out to one of their meet and greets and things like that, where I kind of bundle with others. I think makes more sense again. So we'll see. Maybe if I can get invited, by another YouTuber who has a bigger audience, maybe something like that could make sense to go to. We'll have to see. And let me see. Luke says, I've been having a soft spot lately for Mercedes E-Class wagons between 2012 and 2019. Nice. Any wagons, pretty cool in my book. So I'm glad you're having a soft spot for those. Just be careful with older German vehicles because, you just got to make sure you have plenty of money for maintenance and for repairs and all that. And be sure that you're ready to, figure out electrical gremlins because they like to have a lot of those too. But otherwise, if you can handle all that, I think it'd be really cool. And let me see. I see Danny says he went on a big rant about a school district being annoying. Just needed a vent. No worries, Danny. And the BT says, hi, Matt. What is your take on turbo versus NA engines? Some reviewers like NA, but also do not mind turbos. It entirely comes down to use case, kind of like I mentioned with the Mazda and the CRV earlier. There are certain instances where I think where turbos are better, and there's other instances where I think naturally aspirated is better. So as far as like my preference of which I like better, I mean, between the two, I mean, it comes down to the transmission they're hooked up to a lot of times too, because if you have a crappy transmission, like even a turbo can feel slow, and likewise, if you have a really good transmission hooked up to a naturally aspirated engine, it could feel pretty quick still. I think really with the response, the more and more that I drive gas vehicles, like it was even funny. We were driving in the Audi S5 we just saw the week with that, and my daughter was like, go fast in the S5, and I'm like, okay. So I stomp on it, and full throttle, and it's like, okay, you get a downshift, and then you get the engine starting to go, and then you get the turbo going, and it's this whole process, and then we start going pretty quickly. And Beth's like, wow, like that just feels so slow to me now. It's like always having, the electric power. And I'm like, yeah, she's like, why do people buy gas stuff anymore? I'm like, because, it's about that experience for some people, and I can appreciate that. But like truly, it's just, yeah, I won't go on a, EV rant, but like clearly like that's, if you really want the best powertrain, like to me, EV is just the best way to propel a car if you want to have instant response, instant power, and a ton of power. It just, from an objective, like, not adding in the fun stuff, but just from propelling a car, I think EV has kind of perfected it. But whenever we're talking about other cars, it comes down to the motor and stuff. Like I think there's some instances where like twin turbos can be fun, but like also overboard. Like I think Z06 I prefer over ZR1. I haven't driven ZR1, but like Z06 is already stupid fast. Like lose your license really easily if you don't have restraint kind of fast. And there's no need to go any crazier. And I think in that case, yes, it's fast. Yes, it's fun. Can you ever use it safely and, again, keep your license? If it's a track car, great. But if you're on the street with it and you're trying to have fun with it, like that's a case where turbos actually are worse. I think you're much better off with the Z06. I even think the same thing. GT500 is a blast with the supercharger on that, but like I think GT350 is actually the better street car because you can actually have a little bit more fun. They're also so tall with the gearing that you can't have as much fun as you should be able to have because second gear tops out at like 80 miles an hour or whatever. But like I think there's some of those things. Now, if we're talking about regular cars, typically with regular cars, I think turbo is the better way to go because you have more power down low and you don't have to wait around for the engine to rev up to $6,000 in order to get actual power out of it. So I think this is why we see all the regular commuter stuff. A lot of it has gone turbocharged, and I think that makes for a better driving experience. Again, for the vast majority of driving people do, where they're sitting between 2 and 3, maybe 4,000 RPM for 90% of that car's life. Where do turbos thrive? In those RPM ranges. Where does naturally aspirated engines, where do they thrive? At 4, 5, 6,000 RPM. You got to rev them to the moon. It's just when you look at real use cases for regular people, turbo is definitely the more superior thing for what those people need, and giving them the power, in actual realistic RPMs. And also, I think turbos actually take a little bit of aggravation away. Like if you're not someone who's like, "Wee, I'm going to red line." Like a lot of people, it's like, like they're flooring it because they're annoyed because they got to get somewhere or they're trying to pass or whatever. And the frustration of all of this process adds to your aggravation as a driver. And I think with turbo, some of that's been eased because you have instant response, oftentimes, especially if you're talking about a CVT combo, and you have, just that extra shove earlier on. So you don't have to have as much of a waiting period, because every millisecond that ticks by when you're in that kind of a high stress situation, makes it worse. So whenever you're talking about that kind of stuff, I think, again, turbo is the better choice. Now, from a reliability standpoint, some companies do turbos just as reliably as naturally aspirated. I think Honda is a good example of that. I think Toyota is going to probably be a good example of that too. As time goes on, we'll see how their turbo motors do. But I think also a nice compromise in the middle is a naturally aspirated engine with hybrid, like we see Toyota do, because then you get some instant electric response that kind of eases that waiting period. And then you have, the gas engine then kind of revving to the point where it's helping you out a little bit more and kind of, again, filling in some of that dead space. So that's another thing I really love about hybridization. It kind of helps. So hopefully that answers your question. Great question, BT, and thanks for stopping by. And let me see. Dan says, funny story today. I was behind some Mercedes SUV with a bi-turbo emblem, and the exhaust sounded just like a 90s to early 2000s Pontiac / Oldsmobile 3400 V6. I was like, wait, what? Interesting. Yeah, I guess it must have been the bi-turbo V6 that they do on some of those. That, yeah, probably would sound pretty similar to that. That's funny. Yeah, again, everyone likes something different. Chad says, listening to your rant about the brake, I just hear Top Gear saying, speed never killed anyone, suddenly stopping. Yep, that's what gets you, according to Jeremy Clarkson. Very much true. And Ryan says, which car were you most excited to review but let you down when you drove it? I'm trying to think. I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'd have to scroll through, the 850 cars I've reviewed at this point and see if anything jumps out at me just looking at it. But just trying to scroll through mentally, there's definitely at least a couple. None of them jump out at me as like, oh man, that thing really sucked. Because most of the cars I review are fine, like there's very few that are like super bad. Like I can't wait to get out of this thing. I think one recent thing, and maybe this is a dumb reason for this, but Rivian, everyone like super hypes up Rivian, and I had one for a week over the winter time, and the key situation in that car just pissed me off to no end because this stupid thing would not lock and unlock, and that's partially just because they gave me like the key card, which didn't work reliably or even work at all. And then finally, like it was so bad that I begged them to give me access to the app. And so I had to download the app on my phone. And then even with that, I had to pull my phone out of my pocket every single time and unlock it like with the app. I got to pull up the app, hit the unlock button, and then it would unlock. It was the biggest pain to drive that car all week. The Rivian, I mean, it's a good driving vehicle, but that combined with the lack of CarPlay and all the other like weird, like quirky things that Rivian does, like I still don't see, like Rivian makes good vehicles, but from an ownership standpoint, I mean, I guess again, people maybe have better. Like, I think you can get a fob on some of the Rivians, and I know some people just truly do not care about CarPlay, and that's fine. But for me personally, like Rivian is just like I don't look forward to driving another one until they get the key situation worked out. At least I can live with no CarPlay for a week, but like the key thing, just if I can't get into a car reliably, that is like real big, like gets under my skin real fast. And that was also the problem this year with the Polestar 3. That's the other one you saw, probably the little, shorts in the reels that I posted as well of me complaining about Polestar 3. Only 2 window switches and a $90,000 car. All these goofy decisions, including the fact that the fob is a little like Lego brick that you have to recharge it on the wireless charging pad like every time you're in the car, or else it doesn't have enough charge to function as a key fob. I don't know who thought that was a good decision. And then like you also have a key card you could use instead, but that doesn't always work reliably. And that was another car where I couldn't get into it half the time. And I think at the end of the week, it finally was working on the passenger side, but not the driver's side. Some of these things might be early production stuff. So again, not maybe representative of every single one that's out there. But the Polestar and the Rivian easily this year are the two like most annoying cars to live with. Again, the other parts of them are great, but if I have to be fumbling around to just get access to the vehicle, especially both of them, well, the Polestar was spring, but the Rivian was in the winter. So I'm like, it's like 5 degrees outside. I'm trying to get into this damn Rivian, and it was so annoying. If you watch the review, not very many people did, but if you watch the review, you'll see me, rant about it and that. But so those aren't like actual car things. That's just like poorly done software and weird choices. But those are the things that irk me the most these days, because again, the driving experiences are mostly good and everything these days. It's all fine. So really the Achilles heel of most of these cars I found recently, and I mean, even, people talking about, the Dodge Charger, the new Charger bricking, and the Wagoneer's bricking, all that stuff. It's the software. The software is the biggest pain in my butt right now whenever I'm reviewing cars. Some of them just do it badly, and it drives me crazy. And some of these things you can, like, there's weird driving things that you can turn off. You got to find the right sub menu, and you have to, dive 5 menus in and consult the forums to figure out how to do the right thing. And those types of things like drive me crazy. To me, the first impression of a car needs to be very good. And that first impression needs to be, I get in the car without issue, instantly, immediately, every single time. I fire it up and everything works the way I'm expecting to. I'm okay with a learning curve slightly, but if it's always throwing me curveballs and being weird, like, I don't care how good it drives. If I can't get into the damn car every morning, without any issue, 100% of the time, like, I'm over it. Like, get this thing out of here. I don't want it. Like, it's just, and that's one of the big things why, like, with the Lyric, we have a regular key fob, and it's old school, but it works every single time without fail. And this is something we figured out a long time ago, and like why we're going back and reinventing the wheel and making it, this giant fun techie process of, I got to play with my phone to get into my car. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not about that. Like, I'm leaving my key fob in my pocket and I want to get in the car. So that's, I guess, the state of the car world these days is like everything drives fine, and nothing's going to really be a terrible experience. We're not reviewing Yugos or something. Like, it's going to be fine. It's just, did they screw up the software or not? That's really, to me, such a 2025 thing to say, but that's truly, what irks me the most these days. Let me see. I see Wyatt, thanks for stopping by. He says, been loving the videos for years. Happy to see the content continue. Well, thank you so much, Wyatt. Let me see. Hopefully we're not too far behind here on comments. Young Lightfoot says, curious what you guys think. Not sure which car manufacturer I despise more, Chrysler or Kia. I love Kia. I think they're doing great stuff. And Chrysler, just needs more. Pacifica is very good though, I think. I'd love to see them do, more things to lean on their heritage and just have new product. Hopefully, it sounds like that's starting. I think their Blitz starts next year with product, but I hope it's enough. I'm worried it's going to be too little too late for Chrysler. We'll see. And the chat says, I randomly watched the Cars Are Me channel, and he said the Hummer is so inefficient, there's barely any savings from most gas trucks and SUVs. I wonder how true that is. So anytime you're talking about any EV, it comes down to how you charge it. If you are fast charging it at a fast charger, that is oftentimes actually slightly more expensive than filling up with gas. But I think over 90% of EV drivers are charging at home and only charge at home, or 90% of the time, that's what's happening. And I think that's really the big thing. A Hummer is obviously harder because it's so large, doesn't fit in some people's garages. Maybe they can't, charge it as effectively. But if you're charging at home, even a Hummer, it's got to be more efficient than the gas version. Because the gas ones, you're getting 10 mpg in the old gas Hummers. yeah, I don't think there's any way that the Hummer. It's very inefficient for an EV. It's an electric guzzler. I mean, that's exactly. I mean, but that's a Hummer. That's what they've always been. Is obscene and over the top. And at least it's not a Cybertruck. So I'm I'm happy to be behind the wheel of a Hummer, but you couldn't pay me to be behind the wheel of a Cybertruck. So I mean, like, I think that's, yeah, but it really just comes down to that. And that's always the easy thing people like to point to for any of this anti-EV talk is they're like, oh, look, see, like they had to pay $35 to charge for half an hour or whatever. And it's like, yeah. And like with our Mach-E, we did a fast charger, I think 5 or 6 times over the course of that car's life. And the other 3 years we drove it, it was always charged at home and it was like $8 for a fill up. So like, Hummer I know is, a lot less efficient than a Mach-E, but it also comes down to your electric rates where you live. Some people have very high electric rates. It comes down to when you charge at certain places, you can, save a bunch of money by charging during off-peak hours. If you have the luxury of being able to do that, then that can bring down your costs. There's a lot of other ways to custom tailor it. If you do it absolutely wrong and you treat it like a gas station, yeah, you're going to be paying probably just as much with an EV. And this is why I don't recommend EVs to anyone who lives in a place where they can't charge at home. If you can't charge an EV at home, do not buy it. I mean, you can do it, and if you have the dedication, you don't mind the expense, you're just doing it for the experience or whatever, like, more power to you. But like, I personally think it's more of a pain than it's worth if you can't charge at home. That's really the only way I recommend it for people. And let me see here. So DC Texas says, Matt, I have about 120 grand budget for a fun/unique car. Cybertruck, Raptor 37, Bronco Raptor, or M850i/C8Z06. I know different worlds, but what would you choose for unique fun? Doesn't have to be the fastest. Out of all of those, I mean, I'm not an off-roady kind of person. So if you enjoy actually going off-road, you might enjoy some of those, although not the don't get the Cybertruck if you want to go off-road. Raptor is fantastic, though. I've never driven Bronco Raptor. But I did review a Raptor 37 Raptor R. Maybe Raptor R. I guess you can probably win this for 120, right? Or maybe a lightly used one if they're over that new now. I don't know. But regardless, for me, the answer is easy. I'd go C8Z06 all day. Hands down, the most special car of the bunch with that glorious flat plane crank engine. Fantastic to drive too. And so, yeah, that's definitely where I would put my money if I had that. And let me see. C9 Guitar says, what's your favorite luxury car brand that lives up to its heritage? I don't know. I mean, it's easy to say, like, to me, my favorite luxury brand, I think currently is Genesis, because of how well they, do a really good vehicle while also doing a really good value. Excuse me. So that's, I'd say, pretty easy for me to say. I do really like Audi. I think Audi is doing a lot of really great stuff. I think BMW also, to their credit, does do some very good stuff as well. Some fantastic engines. And I think if we are, the component you said, they're living up to their heritage. I think Audi, especially Audi and BMW, are doing that very well for both of them. I think Audi is kind of sticking to what Audi has always done. They have a really solid gas stuff that's got, great all-wheel drive and is, kind of, again, very much evolutionary. Same thing on the BMW side. But then Audi also has the cutting edge stuff, as does BMW. So I think both of those are pretty good. Mercedes is also, doing the similar kind of thing. I just think they're doing it in a less good execution of that. But, I think Mercedes just, they're just kind of losing. They've lost their way a little bit, I think. I see Ryan right below that says the very same thing about the styling there. But yeah, I think that's BMW, though, their styling is a little out there, even if they are trying to have some historical cues and stuff. I'd say Audi is the closest to sticking to their old heritage of, like, they have cool designs, but nothing that truly, like, makes your eyes hurt. And that's kind of what Audis have always done, is they've, been kind of the understated one, the one that doesn't rock the boat too much, but they're, most of the time very good vehicles. And so I think that's kind of where I land on that question. And great question. Thanks for asking, C9. Thanks for stopping by. And I see Young's asking or saying, my biggest gripe with Chrysler products is the concept of paying money for them. Kia is just a disposable consumerist version of a car. See, that's a very outdated version of Kia to me. Maybe you remember the Kias of the 80s. But Hyundai and Kia to me still these days make some of the most impressive cars. They're pushing the envelope in ways that others aren't, whether it's styling, whether it's technology, whether it's pricing. They do all those things and they have a great warranty to back it up too. So I know there's a lot of people that still give the Korean car companies a bunch of crap. I think they do fantastic stuff. I love that Hyundai has every single car look actually different instead of small, medium, large for their styling language. I think I love everything Hyundai is doing, honestly. And they're one of the few companies, when we're talking about companies that have big misses and things that really just like are head scratchers, I think Hyundai and Kia are very good at reading the room and figuring out, hey, look, this is something others aren't doing. Let's do that. Let's fill that gap. Let's fill that niche. And they're very proactive with adding in stuff and implementing changes and listening to feedback, and that's refreshing, because there's so many car companies that don't do that, and they're just like, oh, we know the best way and we don't care what everyone thinks. And have very standoffish, like, even, I mean, all the interviews with BMW's design directors, and they're like, the XM isn't for everyone, it's not supposed to look good, and like, it's like, just you can sense the snobbiness from a mile away, and like there's none of that with like Hyundai and Kia and Genesis, I think. So like there's some of that I think I really appreciate about the Koreans. They're humble with the way that they do these things, and that's just a personality trait that I very much appreciate and agree with. And so that's why it's very easy for me to get behind those companies, because they're really trying hard and they're doing fantastic products. I think they're one of the, anytime I get into a Hyundai or a Kia, I'm like, this makes sense for its price point. This offers really good value. This is a really nice driving thing. It looks cool, whatever. I think I don't know. I love all the Korean stuff. And C. B. Mitchell said, at least the iX3 went back to smaller grills. Should have went back to the rounded look of the traditional twin kidneys. But this E9 owner is just lighting the torches, sharpening the pitchforks. Well, yeah, sorry that. Yeah, it's not a traditional twin kidney grill there. I agree. That would have been the better way to do it. But yeah, I mean, I think iX3 is, all things considered, fairly well done. I do actually like the back end on the iX3. I think that actually looks pretty cool. And I can kind of appreciate the slightly retro kind of vibe to that stuff. So, yeah. But let me see. So I know we were talking about the mods earlier, so that's covered. I see also DC Texas is throwing in the LC500 into the mix. LC500 is a really special car too. I think C806 is more exciting, but if you're going to be driving it, 100,000 plus miles, then absolutely LC500 is the way to go over Z8 C8Z06. And let me see here. Where were we? So scrolling past the mod discussion here. So Tastebud 420 says, my last car was a G37 straight pipes with a fart can that shot fire. I just put HFCs on my 370Z and appreciate the subtle and quiet growl versus the explosive fart can. Nice. So yeah, I mean, some of it, it's just, you got to get that out of your system. You have your fun, and then you calm down as you age or whatever. I know that's the thing with me. I used to be super into modding my cars, and I mean, now obviously there's not anything to do with the EVs, but even the Bullet, even the Mustangs, I didn't do much aside from the EcoBoost, which I did those mods for the content purposes. But yeah, I'm a firm believer in buy a car that you actually like out of the box. It's a big purchase. You shouldn't need to fix it the second you buy it. So that's why I'm just not into mods as much myself. But DC Texas says that's Doug DeMiro in the helicopter trying to scramble your Wi-Fi we had earlier. Yeah, definitely could very well be. I don't know what he's up to anymore. Is he just like living the easy life, or maybe he's still working hard? I don't know. He does do videos still, but I know he had his giant payout there from selling cars and bids. So I'm not sure how long he's contractually obligated to keep doing that stuff, but I'm sure he could sail off into the sunset once that lapses, whenever that is. But more power to him. I wish that was me. So um, gotta respect the hustle, I guess. But the OKS Basis says, I think the last vehicle I had with a modified exhaust was my bagged Isuzu Hombre 4-cylinder with a straight pipe. Nice. That's funny. And man, that's a car we haven't heard, or a vehicle we haven't heard about in a long time. That's funny. And let me see. So again, all the other stuff we covered here. And sorry, I apologize. I missed the other couple of super chats here. So Chad, thank you for a super chat. He says, we love this channel, being married at Pride. I love a lot of people don't know we love cars, but your channel has helped us connect to and help multiple people. That's awesome. I'm so happy that it's been a help to you, and I'm so happy that it's helped you to help others. And yeah, it's a it's a fun thing to just, I don't know, the common bond of cars. I think it's kind of gotten lost in the past few years a little bit because everyone's just so polarized and divisive, especially with politics and stuff. But I hope that we can get back to cars truly being this uniting thing that, regardless of who you love, who you support politically, whatever, like being able to have this bond of like, hey, that sounds good, or that looks cool, or this makes me happy when I drive it. Like I really wish that, we could get back to that. And I think, culture might not facilitate that, as again, we just keep getting, seems like everything gets more and more polarized, but maybe someday there'll be some kind of breaking point where people finally just say, like, why are we bickering about this stuff? Let's just come together, who knows? But I do love it. It still does, unite a lot of people, I think, more than other hobbies. And that's one of the things I love about cars still. And YH, thank you for the super chat. He says, can an EV downshift so hard it sets off car alarms? Definitely not. Yeah, I'm not looking to set off car alarms, but if that, is your way of having fun, YH, as long as you're not disturbing the peace too much there, if you're doing it in the middle of nowhere or something, then yeah, enjoy. But if you lived in my neighborhood, I wouldn't be friends. I don't, because I'd be so mad waking up the neighbors with a loud exhaust like that. That's a little bit too much for me. But thank you for the super chat. And let me see. Where were we here? Yeah, we're getting close to the end here. And actually, we just saw we're at the 2-hour mark now. So to the last few questions here, and we can head on out. But Michelle says, Toyota got rid of the base trim regular Highlander for 26. I saw that. Yeah, starts from the XLE now, and the all-wheel drive is now standard across the board. No more front-wheel drive. Seems like they're simplifying the trims now that the Grand Highlander took over. Yeah. So I don't like seeing base trims go away, especially, again, this is another one. Toyota oftentimes does make good decisions, but this is a fairly rare miss for them. Like, if you want to pay higher money, who is going for Highlander over Grand Highlander? Like, Grand Highlander is the better vehicle in every way, and it's like pretty much the same money. The whole redeeming quality of Highlander, and I actually, like, this was what I was told whenever I was on the Grand Highlander media drive. I was standing next to the one guy that had set up the packaging and stuff, and I'm like, where does Highlander fit into this? And he's like, well, it's a lower starting point, and it's you can get a front wheel drive, all these types of things. Like, okay, that makes sense, cool, totally make watertight argument, totally get it. And if that's now out the window, yeah, why does anyone buy a Highlander? I mean, maybe they're simplifying trims. I mean, the Highlander is on its way out. It's an old generation at this point. So, maybe there's some of that that's, they're paving the way for next generation. They're kind of just simplifying things here. If this is the last model year, I don't know what their plans are for Highlander. But yeah, so, I mean, we'll see, but I think that's not a great choice. I mean, they see the tariff stuff. They see all this stuff. So why are you getting rid of base trims? There must be some, technical reason that's making it hard to offer it or something. But just every time someone gets rid of a base trim, I just want to pound my fist on the table and be like, why are we doing this? Why are we making it harder for people to buy your cars? Especially when it's something that's already existing in there. There's no work involved. It's just keep making it. And that just seems like too big of an ask right now. I don't know. And let me see. DC Texas says, I'm having a hard Bullet Mustang days flashbacks. Makes me remember all the way back to the Subaru fan years. Nostalgia running high. Yeah, there's some fun times there. Yeah, it's funny. Every once in a while, I'll go back and cringe through one of my old reviews where it's like, man, I had so much room for improvement. But that's the whole point of growth, is if you don't cringe at stuff you did 10 years ago, you're probably not growing. So but it's it's kind of funny seeing some of that old stuff, but I'm so glad that everyone has so much nostalgia for it. And it's fun stuff. It's just fun to look back at, different time, different different world. It's crazy. And Raphael says, money is tough. There are a lot of cars I like, but paying for mine is hard enough. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Obviously, I had to get rid of the Bullet, and it's tough out there these days. And so, yeah, why car companies think raising the average transaction price is a good idea when we have record high repo rates right now, and we have people really showing like there's real financial distress going on. And it's just going to get worse. The tariffs haven't even really fully hit, and that's going to start hitting the supply chain here pretty soon. And it's going to be an interesting rest of the year, I think. People think, it's something that's kind of the ship has sailed, or that has kind of passed, and it hasn't. It's just now, with the new de minimis, I think is what it's called, the little thing where they're now tariffing even things under $800. That's going to start hitting stuff pretty hard. There's going to be some discomfort here, and so why any car company knows this and thinks it's good to raise prices, it's just their sales on everything is going to crater, just absolutely crater. But that's their bed. They're going to lie in it. And let me see here. So, CTFI says my buddy got 5 people in a 5th gen Prelude. That's impressive. And let me see. Donald Zaramp says, hi, Matt. Not going to lie, this is my first time seeing your channel since you got married, and I bought my first car. Hope you're doing well. Well, thanks for stopping by. Welcome back after, about 10 years or so. Actually, we had our 10-year anniversary, Beth and I, back in July. So welcome back. I hope you enjoy the videos if you decide to watch more. And if nothing else, hope you enjoy these lives, and looking forward to chatting if you have any questions or comments here in future live streams. And also I see Chad, thank you so much for super chat again. He says, several times I've helped people work on their cars and they are surprised. I'm like, I grew up poor and I like driving. Yeah, there's that as well. It's it's one of those things that's very rewarding about the old cars and that old generation, is being able to work on stuff more than a lot of modern stuff, where again there's always glitches, and it's like none of us are IT professionals for the most part. Maybe some of you are, but like, I can't fix computer stuff. You have to go to the dealer. And that's another thing that makes me a little nervous about all this software being buggy and stuff. It's like you can't fix it unless you go to the dealer. I love mechanical stuff that you can still actually fix is very nice. Or if you can actually perfect the EV stuff, they should be very reliable once you get through the software, because it's just simple electric motors. There's not a whole lot to screw up there. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much, Chad, for the super chat, and that's awesome you're out there helping people. But Fook says Chad is a Chad. It seems like Chad is actually the opposite of a stereotypical Chad. He's helping people. It seems like he's very nice. Not to stereotype with any other Chads out there, but my understanding is the typical like Chad stereotype is like, the bro that's pounding protein nonstop and using the word alpha excessively and all that. Like, that's the typical Chad. And so sounds like Chad is very much not that. So thanks for being a kind Chad. And Fuchs says, oh no, I thought Chad means good. maybe I don't know, maybe I have a different understanding of Chad, but like every time I see Chad it's used in a derogatory term, as far as calling someone a Chad. So sorry, Chad. That's what I've always heard though. Maybe others have a better use of that word. I don't know. But let me see. And let me see here. Where were we? Try and wrap up here with the last few. But we're pretty close to the end here. So Tracy's saying, Matt, do you have the lyric or the optic? I'm thinking of buying the optic. We have a lyric. We absolutely love it. For us, optic wasn't an option because it didn't have Apple CarPlay. If it had CarPlay, it would be a strong consideration. Beth says she probably would have still wanted lyric just because she likes the extra space. But man, I mean, optic is like half the price for a lease over the already, not very expensive lyric. But if it came down to like being half as expensive, again, it's just CarPlay is just a non-starter. Like we have to have CarPlay, even if it means spending double the car payment. Like it's too vital for us. But if you don't care about that, then absolutely optic is great. I really enjoyed it. I did a review of one. It was awesome. We reviewed the lyric as well last year. If you want to hear, all the thoughts on that, but yeah, we love our lyric. It's great. But optic is also fantastic if you don't need the CarPlay. And Dan says, Miata insurance is pretty cheap. Fiat Spider also. My Fiesta ST and Minis were more funny enough. Yeah, that's surprising. I would have expected the opposite. So that's cool. And thanks for sharing a little bit of insight there on that. Yeah, I'm wondering if G86 still is more or less. But yeah, I'm glad Miata's not too bad. TFI says Fiat 500e versus McDonald's parking trays. That would be fun. If you're talking like the people who slide around with like trays under their wheels, is that what you're talking? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing the joke. I apologize, TFI. But 500e is such a fun little car. Nice short wheelbase. And Fuchs says Prelude doesn't need to be its own thing. Make it a Civic Coupe, make it a hybrid if you must, and call it a Prelude. Even better with a manual. Yeah. I agree, though. I think that's all it needed to be. It was just a Civic Coupe for sure. And let me see. James says the CRZ was offered with a manual transmission. You're right, it was, but that was an old generation hybrid. This new hybrid that Honda, well, not new, the hybrid that Honda's been using for the past 5+ years now, doesn't have an actual transmission at all. They call it like it has an eCVT that like doles out the power, but it's not an actual transmission. It's not actually even a CVT. It's like because it actually goes to a direct drive where the engine directly connects to the wheels when you're over, I think, 55 or 60. But there is no actual transmission there. And that's why in the Prelude, it's got to be virtual with the gear shifting and stuff, because there's nothing to actually manipulate as far as transmission goes. So that's why there's no option for a manual. Now, could they maybe do some very expensive engineering to try and force that powertrain to work with a manual transmission? Maybe. The thing is, it's also not even just the fact there's no transmission, but like the gas engine in the Honda hybrid system doesn't propel the wheels. It powers, it's a generator to power electric motors at the wheels, and that's what moves you. It's actually like an electric vehicle with a gas generator, really, for the Honda hybrid system, to oversimplify it, but that's kind of what it is. And so that's kind of the thing that holds you back there, is this, that there's no way to do that. Because if you have a manual transmission hooked up to the engine, that's great, but then the engine does what it needs to do to get the power it needs to make to generate the electricity for those motors. And so you doing whatever you want with the transmission would potentially screw up that power delivery. And I think that's why with the virtual stuff in the Prelude, it's probably going to do it a lot of the time, but it probably won't do it all the time, or it'll have limitations, because there's going to be times where it's like, okay, you have your foot to the floor, you're requesting full power, but we're not actually going to give you full power because you are in this manual mode where you're sitting at 2,000 RPMs, and 2,000 RPMs is generating enough electricity for these electric motors to do 30 horsepower or whatever it is, and so it's going to either override that, or it's going to, be like an exaggerated version of what you have with a regular gas engine and transmission, just even worse, because again, it's about that being a generator and needing to have the revs that it needs for the electricity that it needs. So that's really the trickiest part. And I see Danny's reposting. So we talked about earlier, Danny, about your charger. If you might have maybe hopped out and came back in, but I'm sorry to hear your charger bricked. I've heard that there's some issues with this Stellantis stuff, and hopefully the S650 is better. But S650 also has had some software issues that have caused those to brick too. Hopefully they've got that fixed for 2025, but I know 24 has had some of that early on at least. But hopefully, that's what the lemon law is for. Here in PA, you have to have the car in the shop for a long time before lemon law kicks in. But hopefully you can get it resolved sooner than that. But like I mentioned earlier, in case you missed it, a lot of people with the Stellantis EVs like the Wagoneer S have had luck with just disconnecting the battery, doing an actual hard reset, and then connecting it again after 30 seconds or a minute or whatever. And that kind of brings them back to life sometimes. If you haven't tried that yet, try that. But sorry to hear that it's been not a great experience so far. It seems like those definitely are having more issues than the typical new EV typically does, because it's just a brand new platform for Stellantis. Let me see. DC Texas says, Captain Slow, you can just walk to Oregon and he'll still be there. Maybe that's possible. I hope I cross paths in the airport. That'd be fun. And let me see here. So where are we here? So Raphael says, I don't hate turbos, but I'll always choose NA if it's available. Yeah, I mean, it's, there's less moving parts, so there's that component, certainly for turbos too. And let me see why it says, but I want to sound like Rolling Thunder when I do flybys, nothing like a V8 roar. It is a great sound for sure. And Call Me Q says, profound statement from your missus about why anyone buys gas anymore. It's just, again, all personal preference. For her, she can't stand waiting around for transmissions to make up their minds. And other people don't mind it, so that's why it's great to have something for everyone. And Vishal says, the S5 sounds great. Loved listening to it in the review and the POV drives. I'm glad you enjoyed those. I know the POV drives, you don't probably hear too much exhaust sound, but hopefully at least even that little bit at regular driving speeds is kind of refreshing, since you're probably in other POVs hearing, people revving them like crazy and, going all out. So it's kind of, I'm glad the POV videos are actually still getting pretty decent views. I'm very thankful that some of you have been enjoying those, and a different take. I'm just, again, trying to relax everyone with a relaxing POV, trying to give everyone a little bit of calm in this insane world we're in, to have a little bit of peace with a nice relaxing summer morning or summer evening drive in whatever car I have that week. See why it says why Hellcats come with two keys, the red cat and the scaredy cat black key. I mean, the nice thing about the Hellcats having the two keys is you do get better fuel economy if the engine's running the more conservative tune, so that's nice. But I feel like almost every Hellcat owner probably drives with the red key almost all the time. B. Mitchell says, as I told my Ford dealer recently, you lease a turbo, you own a naturally aspirated. I guess we'll see. Honda again doing the turbo thing. Toyota's doing the turbo thing now. I think there's a lot of turbo cars. There are some certainly that have had a shorter lifespan as a result. But I think that doesn't necessarily have to be true forever, and I don't think it's always true even now. I mean, I've seen there's even someone who had a 2022 Civic, the new generation here, touring with the 1.5T, who is a medical courier, and they have already put like 250,000 miles on their Civic, and it was up for sale at a dealership. And I looked at the Carfax because it's hilarious. Like, it's like every week and a half or 2 weeks they were doing an oil change. But it was like just a zillion oil changes and like zero issues. And a lot of times things also fall apart due to age more so than mileage. So, not a perfect representation, but that shows like that motor did not need any servicing, and 250,000 miles in the course of, this was actually last year. So within 2 years or less, putting 250,000 miles on a car, and the motor was solid, totally fine. Maybe he had good luck or whoever it was, I don't know. But like, those instances show me, and I see a lot of people even on the Mileage Impossible Facebook page that, turbo motors, and they're, doing tons of miles and they're fine. So, I don't think that's universally true, but certainly, again, naturally aspirated, you have less stuff to worry about. And that should help you long term. But to me, that's not always the case. And I've seen some real good success stories with turbos too. And Dave says, Matt doing Tail of the Dragon. Let's see how she does. And we don't hear from him for 3 days. Yeah, Tail of the Dragon would be great. I've actually heard too though that like Tail of the Dragon is really over congested, especially this time of year, because everyone wants to be on it, and it's also a regular road that some trucks and stuff still use too. So like I've heard that like the real bliss of automotive driving around there is actually like I think there's one called like the Back of the Dragon, and there's other roads surrounding it because there's a bunch around there that are fantastic, that are just really good mountain roads around there that I think might be even a little more fun. So yeah, I'd love to get lost in those mountains for days and just race around and have a blast on all the less traveled roads. I think it'd be great. I mean, even like I went to Virginia Tech for college, and like there's a bunch of awesome roads that I discovered over my 4 years there, just in the Virginia mountains that are just fantastic driving roads. And there's a lot in that area. It's a really good spot to be a car enthusiast. And let me see here. So, where were we here? And Chad says he got married in 2020. So, well, happy 5 years here, or hopefully soon to be 5 years, Chad, to you and Jordan. Hope you guys are having a blast and having as much fun as you had 5 years ago. Let me see here. My scrolling is currently scrolling up. There we go. I think I'm back to having a working scroll here. Okay, Chad says, for those old enough, I lived through the hanging Chad with Bush Gore in Florida, so I'm tough with my name now. Well, I'm glad that it's something you're used to, I guess. But I remember the hanging Chad thing, but I don't remember exactly what that referred to. I just remember hearing that, but maybe I was too young to recognize, because the Bush and Gore thing that was that year 2000, right? So I would have been like 10, so a little bit out of my awareness zone probably at that point. But let me see. So where are we? So Chad says, call IT to get into your own car. That's what it'll come down to pretty soon. So let me see. Last few questions here, and we'll sign off already 20 minutes over. Apologies, everyone, but I see Wyatt is asking why cars have California emissions. It's because California is a gigantic amount of buyers. They're the number 4 economy in the world on their own. And so that's a very large market that car companies need to cater to. And so, until, the past few months here, California being as large as it is, they, had the ability to set their own emissions regulations and all that stuff. And so, they said, we want to do better. We want to keep pushing the envelope. We want to improve things more than the federal government wants to do. And, everyone was like, okay, well, all these other states followed in line with that. And it made sense to just say, okay, well, we'd rather over engineer that stuff for California emissions. For a long time, anyone who's old enough remembers, there was certain cars where you could have it with California emissions equipment on it and without California emissions equipment on. So they did for a long time custom tailor to the two different markets basically that were out there. But I think it just got to a point where it was over complexity for the production line, and it's just all do one thing, and that one thing has to be the thing that's compliant with this gigantic California economy. So I think that's the main reason why. And so it makes sense, especially from an accountant standpoint and all that. But we'll see how that plays out for California here with all the changes that are trying to be implemented and the court fights over that stuff. We'll see if California keeps that ability or what ends up happening with that. But anything that changes will be short-lived anyway, I think. Again, I don't think this stuff's going to last forever, but we'll see what happens. And Chad says, I really like the Lincoln Continental. Do you owe its demise to the only SUV mindset or something else? So I think I'll try to be brief with this. The main issues with the Continental are the back seat and the trunk are a little too small. And I think the biggest problem was for some fleet purchasers, especially because that's where they sold a ton of Continentals in the past and town cars before that. But like they had really big trunks and a nice big back seat that was easy for shuttling people around. I think the back seat is fine in the Continental, but I think that at that point, everyone already had one foot into like just buying Navigators instead. And, the fact that the trunk was a little small on Continental, I think was the biggest problem. I think backseat they could have worked with. It was just the trunk. And I think Continental, they just didn't go big enough. If they would have added another 6 inches to that car, that I think would have made the difference. Even add another foot just for good measure. I think that would have probably helped it to be a lot more of a success, and also helped to feel more prestigious because they marketed it as this big, grand, return to Continental and everything. And I think it needed to be a big, grand car as a result. And it just, wasn't quite as big as I think it should have been. I don't know if there's maybe limitations because it's on the same CD6 platform as Mustang kind of really is, and also what we see even with like Explorer in a way. I think a slight difference is there, but same kind of thing. So maybe there's just some limitations with how much they could stretch it. I don't know. But that's, even if they would have had giant overhangs, I think it would have been fine, even if you had a shorter wheelbase. But I think that was really the main problem with it. Also, SUVs, certainly were part of that. But I think that if it was better done, it would have stuck around a little bit longer. And let me see. Mr. 705 says money, no option. If you were able to pick one vehicle to drive for the rest of your life, what would it be? I mean, honestly, it probably was going to be the Bullet. That was the plan, was to keep that car forever. Because I think that car does everything perfectly. Again, it's got, all the power I ever need, has enough space to bring everyone, the whole family along if I wanted to, had enough practicality for me, had enough technology for me. It was really perfect. It had all the stuff. It had the active suspension, so I could have it in whatever mood I wanted to be in. Same thing for the exhaust, so I could be quiet to not, be waking everyone up, and then have it loud whenever I'm, wanting that. That was really the car. And so I think, there might be more expensive things. Now, if we're trying to say like money is truly no object, and if that also included like maintenance and all that kind of stuff, I'd say something exotic, but then I'd be like self-conscious about driving something super exotic around everywhere. Like I could say potentially Ferrari Pro Songway, Ferrari GT4 Lusso, something like that, has 4 seats and, could fit the family and would be like the ultimate daily driver for me. V12 all-wheel drive, like that's my definition of bliss. But, can you take Ferrari Pro Songway to the regular, grocery store every week? Do you want to be driving a $500,000 car around everywhere? I live in a nice part of Pittsburgh, but there's times where, I don't know if I'd want to be rolling up in a 500 grand car, especially me. Also, I don't love, being super show offy, and, I like flying under the radar, which I loved about the Bullet. There's no badges and you can keep it quiet, and it just looks like, a Mustang, but there's enough of them around that it doesn't, make people, break their necks looking at you, so I mean, yeah, I think it would probably just end up having to be the Bullet. So maybe someday we'll get back to it. We'll see what happens. But let me see. Decepticon, thanks for stopping by here at the end. Hope you're doing well. And I'm doing well here. Thanks for asking. I hope everything's good. And I see YH is discussing Hyundai and Kia have no option but to be humble. The Germans have the history and the prestige. Yeah, but you gotta stay hungry. If you rest on your laurels and you just cash in on a brand, I mean, that works, but I think they're losing ground to Genesis. I see a ton of GV70s and GV80s, and those were all people who previously were driving X3s, Q5s, and GLCs, and now they're in GV70s. That's a part of the piece that they're missing, that they're not getting anymore. That's got to hurt them, the higher brands. So, maybe it doesn't hurt them as much, they don't really care, but, Genesis is getting a lot of market share, and they're really, again, pushing the envelope. And I think that's, you got to be careful if you're one of these top dogs. You can get knocked off your perch real easily. Especially these days with the crazy upsets we've seen in the car world, and I think it's entirely possible. They don't have to be the top dogs forever if they don't innovate, but I think most of them are, again, doing a very good job of innovating. But Steven, the Corvette guy, says, do you have any idea when they will show off the new EV3 in the US? I don't know when EV3 is coming here. EV4 we saw, and I already sat and everything at the New York Auto Show. So that's I think coming early 2026. I think I remember they said. So EV3 is going to be after that. Are we? So EV3 is the SUV, right? Yeah. So I think I don't know when that's coming. I haven't heard anything about it, honestly. But if it is a 2026 model year, then obviously, I'd have to say sometime the first half of next year. It's certainly not coming anytime this year, I don't think. Maybe we'll get a reveal at the LA Auto Show of the, you know, final US look with, those orange side markers or whatever. But as far as actually going on sale, definitely probably won't be anytime this year, I don't think. Um, and that's another thing with the EVs, like, are they going to rush it? If again they're going into a market that's a lot more hostile than it was, just a few months ago. I don't know. We'll have to see. And YH says I use quiet mode in my neighborhood. That's rule number one. Well, I appreciate that for all the other fellow parents out there. That's definitely very much appreciated. And let me see. So Lance Wallace says you're referring to the derogatory thing about Chad. Yeah, I despise that when people mention it to me. Yeah, and that's why stereotypes don't fit because there's lots of nice Chads out there. And TFI is talking about tray sliding. Gotcha. Yeah, that could be a fun thing to do in the Fiat someday. And Chad says thanks for another great chat and great community you formed, Matt. I know I love all the back and forth we've all had tonight, and hope you guys enjoyed the conversation as well. And let's see, Lance Roth enjoys it as well, and appreciate the kind words. Let me see. So last couple here. I see Concert is asking, how do you feel about the new CX-5 losing the turbo? Just bought a 25 turbo premium and glad I did. Yeah, it's a shame they're not offering it. I think, they're positioning the hybrid in 2027 that's coming to be the elevated performance version, in their words, so I think that's their plan. But okay, that's coming in 2027. What are you going to do for the next, year and a half or 2 years until you get there, and I mean, I guess maybe turbo sales aren't a large enough proportion for them to worry about it for a temporary, time period here. But it is kind of strange that they're just only doing it because it's just carryover. Why can't they just stuff the motor in there and, sell it for a couple of years and offer it as an option for people who don't want hybrid power and want more power still? Because the whole idea with the turbo for Mazda was there was supposed to be a more premium thing to kind of have the CX-5 be able to compete with the turbocharged European competitors and stuff, the luxury stuff. I think that's kind of was the goal. That's why Mazda 3 got the turbo. It wasn't to make a Mazda Speed 3 or anything. It was because they wanted to compete with A3 and with BMW, 2 Series Grand Coupe and stuff. So I think, giving up the turbo gives up some of that premium positioning temporarily, which is kind of surprising because they're real into that. So I don't know, but I'm glad you grabbed one of the last 25s there, and hope you enjoy it. My sister loves her CX-5. She has the non-turbo, but she loves it. My neighbor's got a CX-5. They love it. My other neighbor had a CX-5. He had to trade it in, but he loved it. Yeah, they're great cars. So hope you enjoy yours too. And Decepticon says, surprised you didn't say GR Corolla. GR Corolla is another top pick, for a car I could just drive forever and have for the rest of my life. I mean, in GR Corolla, you're right. I mean, I guess, that would probably be a more family friendly one, and one that I could probably just, drive forever. I think I would eventually miss some of the luxury features, and that's kind of the thing about the Bullet that's nice is it had the heated steering wheel, it had the cooled seats and all that stuff. But GR Corolla is also, if I, had the ability and I wasn't able to, drive anything else for the rest of my life, if I was forced to stick with one car forever and it couldn't be the Bullet, I think GR Corolla would probably be the other, reasonably priced one for sure. So you're correct, Decepticon. That would be the other one. Chad, thanks so much for another super chat here at the end. He says, I keep Fix-A-Flat and air pumps to help in my car. That's awesome. B. Mitchell says, drink even if we had to go to overtime for it. I'd let everyone got at least one drink here for the evening. It's funny. All right. So Nathaniel, thanks for stopping by at the end here. He says, hey, man, I hope you're doing well. The Lincoln Conti is actually front-wheel drive, making it fusion-based. I thought CD6 had the flexibility to go front or rear. I didn't think it was fusion based. Maybe it is though. I haven't. I always thought because it was built in the same factory as Mustang. I thought it had shared some components, but maybe not. It's been so long, but thanks for the info. Thanks for stopping by, Nathaniel. Hope you're doing well. And all right, so yeah, we have reached the end here, I think. So thank you all so much for hanging out here for 2.5 hours, man.